Good morning. Okay, today is day 3 of the Physical Therapy Board hearing. It is December 8th, and we will start the day off with our call to order. I'm doing that now. And roll call.
Tanya McMillian,
Present.
Dale Armstrong. Dale Armstrong is absent. Karen Brandon,
Present.
Katarina Ellaby,
Present.
Samuel Pugh,
Present.
Alicia Benamit. Here. All members are present with the exception of Dale Armstrong, and the board has a quorum.
Thank you. We'll now have our board's mission statement.
The mission of the Physical Therapy Board of California is to advance and protect the interests of the people of California by the effective administration of the Physical Therapy Practice Act.
Thank you. Before we, excuse me, before we pick up with item 22 on your agenda, I'm going to hand it over to Jason.
Good morning. For this meeting, typically when we're in Sacramento, once a year, we like to do each agenda item presented by the staff that are responsible for the work behind it. And so we're going to do some introductions as part of these kind of reports. And just for kind of a point of clarity, some of the titles that they're going to give to you this morning might sound a little new, especially with these first couple ones. Just from growth and kind of expansion, we've done some internal restructuring. So as an example, we have created an exec unit with inside of the PTBC, and some of the admin staff are now part of what we would now call the exec unit. So when they provide their title, they're going to say, "Good morning, I'm a member of the exec unit, and here's what I do." And so if you've never heard that before, that's the explanation. So.
And so exec unit is a new unit?
It's a new unit, it's just a new way to structure internally.
Is it separate from admin unit?
Yes.
However, the agenda items do not say exec unit.
No, and it's more kind of internal structure. So it's not something that you'll actually kind of see affect our reporting and quarterly reporting moving forward or anything like that. It's just a little bit more streamlined communication in the background.
How can we make it a little more clear for public or those who might get confused?
We'll work towards it.
Okay.
I mean, the simple part is policy and procedure that drives board decisions would be exec.
Okay.
The normal administration, the day-to-day, human resources, budget tracking, those kind of things would be considered administrative.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And with that, we can enter into the first new member of the executive.
Okay, so we will now begin with item number 22 on your agenda, legislation report.
Good morning. My name's Brooke Arneson, and I'm the Legislation and Regulation Manager for the board. And I am part of the newly established executive unit. I've worked for PTPC for about 8 years, and I'm responsible for interpreting current and proposed law as it pertains to the Physical Therapy Practice Act. I monitor and evaluate potential legislation for the board and communicate with stakeholders regarding legislative inquiries. I analyze the impact of new laws on the operational and fiscal impact to the board. Also, as the regulatory manager, I review and analyze existing regulations and determine if they are obsolete or inconsistent with current law and prepare regulatory proposals and packages for consideration. I'm looking forward to beginning our continuing competency regulations this year. And with that said, I'll go ahead and start on the legislation report. So 2023 marked the first of a 2-year legislative cycle, which concluded on September 14th. Governor Newsom had until October 14th to sign or veto bills. There were 1,046 bills that reached the governor's desk this year, and of those, the governor signed 890 bills. And he vetoed 156 bills, which is about a 14.9% veto rate. For comparison to last year, during the 2022 session, 1,166 bills reached the governor's desk, and he signed 997 and vetoed 169 for about a 14.5% veto rate. I'll go ahead and direct members to the legislative summary for an update on the bills we've been watching this session. The first bill we discussed a little bit yesterday, and that is AB 931, prior authorization, physical therapy. We did have a support position on that bill, and a copy of that support letter is included in the legislative report on page 52. As we discussed briefly yesterday, this bill would have prohibited a health plan or insurer from requiring prior authorization for the initial 12 physical therapy treatment visits for a new episode of care. The bill would have also required that prior to treatment, the provider verify an enrollee's coverage and disclose the enrollee's cost-sharing maximum out-of-pocket expense per visit, and whether the provider is an in-network or, provider is in-network for the enrollee. The governor's veto message was included in the meeting materials. The next two bills on the legislative summary, both SB 143 and SB 544, amended the Badgley-Keene Open Meeting Act, specifically regarding authorization for a state body to hold public meetings through teleconferencing, utilizing online platforms such as WebEx, amongst amending additional teleconference meeting provisions and requirements. SB 143 was a trailer bill and was effective immediately as it was chaptered on September 13th. SB 544, the Badgley-Keene Open Meeting Act teleconferences, was also chaptered on September 22nd, and that bill will take effect January 1st, 2024. We do have a support position on SB 544, and that letter was also included in the meeting materials on page 54. The following bills on the legislative summary were all chaptered and will take effect January 1st, 2024. AB 1163, the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Disparities Reduction Act, and this bill was chaptered on October 13th, and it expands the data collection obligations of the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Disparities Reduction Act. SB 14, Serious Felonies, Human Trafficking, was chaptered on September 25th, and this bill designated that human trafficking of a minor for purposes of a commercial sex act as a serious felony. The next bill on the legislative summary was SB 372, DCA Licenses and Registrant Records Name and Gender Changes. This bill was chaptered on September 23rd, and it requires licensing entities within DCA to update license records if that licensing entity receives government-issued documentation demonstrating a legal change of name or gender as specified. This bill also allows licensees to request for their prior name to be removed from the online verification system operated by the licensing entities, and establishes a process for individuals to access a licensee's enforcement records under their prior name.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
How might that affect prior discipline on the license?
And that's part of the intention of that legislation, is to essentially be able to remove any kind of what we would call dead naming situations, where if there is a transition of some kind, that there is still a link that we can keep the history,
Okay.
but also kind of go back into that history and make sure that something that's inconsequential, like what gender was being applied to it, is either removed or replaced with the new identity.
What about the name?
So the name history will still be trackable, but it'll only be upon request. So when that inquiry is about that particular person, we can definitely do that and provide it, but it won't be part of the actual DCA search identity.
Yeah. So it sounds like if a consumer were to go and look up the practitioner, the licensee, if there were some history there, it would still be attached to the license number.
It would still be attached to the license number. When you say history, are you referring directly to like a disciplinary history?
Disciplinary history.
So the disciplinary history would be part of the history. The name changing would not be, and would only be upon request,
Yeah.
right? And I guess a good way to look at that is that name changes occur for a number of different reasons, and we typically track them, and you would see that. So if you saw a name change that was either a legal name change for things like marriage or divorce,
Yeah.
or those kind of things, you'd see that history.
Yeah.
In this cases, because of its potentiality, you will not. And it's not the only example of that. We've had situations in the past where the name history can actually be a indicator for violent crime. And so like maybe a divorce where there is a protective order in place, we would remove that history there as well, right? So there's a reason for doing it. And in these legal name changes, that reason kind of carries over in the thinking. And so we'll have kind of some working out to do in how this legislation is going to be implemented. But right now, with DCA search, the disciplinary history will travel with the license number and it will always be available to the consumer. But those transition name changes won't be and will only be available upon request.
Okay, I think the important part's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
The next bill is SB 525, minimum wage healthcare workers, and this bill was chaptered on October 13th and will establish separate minimum wage schedules for covered healthcare employees depending on the nature of the employer. SB 818, Professions of Vocations, is the Business and Professions Committee's omnibus bill, and that bill was chaptered on October 10th. That concludes my legislative report, and please let me know if I can answer any further questions.
I have a question. It's just kind of a silly question, but on page, I need my glasses, 46, we have some definitions of positions taken by the board. Are these positions that we have taken or the positions that are available? Because obviously there's some that are missing, right? And I know that this was in our last meeting materials as well, but I'm just kind of noticing it.
There are positions that are available to take. What positions are you speaking that are
In
missing?
opposition?
So
No?
opposition's not on the list?
There's watch, support if amended, and support.
There should be oppose and oppose if amended.
Yeah.
So those are the other two that are available to us. And that's not, there are definitions. We'll make sure that those materials are updated to provide that as well. I think we've all had that experience of the difference between oppose unless amended or support if amended.
Yes,
It's a
yeah.
very kind of strategic choice in deciding which ones are which. But those 5 are the ones that we have available to
Okay,
us.
thank you.
Any questions, comments from the board?
Something to add to it. I think in this legislative session, the board was very active in trying to kind of get out in front of legislation and let the legislature know what the board's intent were. You issued a couple support letters for some things. And having said that, I think we were much more proactive in doing that. And I would not want to be discouraged in the sense, as an example, the AB 931 bill, this board issued a support. And by all indicators, that bill was just flying through the legislature. The Senate was in complete support. The Assembly was in complete support. And this board also issued its support, a very good for consumers bill, and made it to the governor's office and ended up with that veto. And I don't want that to be kind of a disincentive or disencouraging us from continuing to be expressive early on in the legislature, in the session itself, for this board to provide those letters of support or oppose even in those situations. So we are still also being highly encouraged by the legislature for the boards to provide that input as early as possible in the session, so that they don't get to kind of past one house and into the next before they find out from the actual regulator involved in the situation that there may be some issues with laws or statutes being proposed. So that one really was kind of anomalous, right? I mean, we didn't expect it to be vetoed.
I had a question about that one. So the first question was, who was in opposition of this bill? Brooke, do you know? And then the second question, I was reviewing the veto message regarding his indication that there exists law requiring timely appointments. So the purpose of it to get people access to physical therapy and not having to wait through, a middleman or a second assessment that would inevitably, increase the time that they had to wait to get the care that they needed. I think the bill that I saw was on mental health, but it could be all ancillary within 15 days? Is that
And
correct?
within 15 days, and those statutes exist under the jurisdiction of the Department of Health and the Department of Insurance. So I think that was kind of a necessity message in his veto, is that there are things already in place that are supposed to expedite this process.
If they work, he said.
If they work.
That
And,
was my biggest concern, because I was like, what is the recourse for that is that consumers need to know that they can call the managed care, Department of Managed Care, right? And say, I'm filing a complaint because I have nowhere to go for physical therapy except for this place. And
Right,
it's been 18, 20, 21
we have
days.
continuity issues and,
Right.
you know, and all those kind of things. So I think with that veto, I think, you know, over the next year or two, we should look at whether or not that has had an impact, you know, and this legislation, I'm sure, will be presented again. So we'll have another opportunity at it.
And those that were in opposition on that bill was the Association of California Life and Health Insurance Companies, the California Association of Health Plans, and America's Health Insurance Plans.
And I'm looking at maybe a different analysis, but also included was the Department of Finance.
Oh, that one's on there.
So that's the
Right.
administration itself. So someone in, for whatever reason, finance took a position against it, which may suggest that there was some sort of fiscal impact to the state.
May I add just a personal story of treating patients and having to wait to get this authorization? I just want to say I would definitely encourage the board to support, to send a letter of support for something like this again. I would dig my heels in on that. And I've seen firsthand patients wait and wait, in my view, unnecessarily for skilled care and to prevent falls and other safety hazards from happening. And so this, to me, is still very important. And I look forward to seeing what comes up next year.
I think we've also had the experience that legislatively speaking, sometimes it takes a few sessions for something, a concept like this to actually make it all the way through and you know, become codified. So, and I don't mean to say that as like trying to put a damper on expectations, right? A need is a need, and we should try to address the need, but sometimes it takes 1, 2, 3 times, and this is only the second attempt, so.
Yeah, and there's also the perspective, right? So for some, 15 days might seem like, oh, that's a great time frame. And for someone waiting at home, waiting for a physical therapist to help them learn how to get in and out of bed or up and down from the commode, 2 days is a long time.
Detrimental.
I would piggyback on that too, that if you can get early intervention, you reduce chronicity, which actually ends up reducing cost and the risk of having to do further procedures that cost more. But also, I would say that in looking at the Limited Practice Act that we have in California, this is just a small open door for people to be able to get what the current Practice Act says with insurance, because so many Californians are insured and they're not paying cash for their physical therapy.
I'd like to add a little personal story too. I'm glad that you said that you brought this up, Jason, because being someone who was on the front line and one of the leaders for our child care bill here in this state, which took 16 years before it got signed, and living through 3 vetoes, it is discouraging. But like you guys said, the need does not change. And so one veto does not erase what needs to be done. So we've got to stay diligent, stay committed. I know I've done it 13 and a half years. So, but it can be done. And in this case, I believe it will be done. So any further comments from the board?
I guess silver lining would be at least we know what their concerns are now, so we can address them next time we put it forward.
Exactly. Any public comment? Hearing none, so we will move on to item 23, our rulemaking report. Back to you, Brooke.
So for the continuing competency regulations, we are currently in the initial phase of the regulatory process. So we are researching, collecting data, working on proposed amendments to the existing continuing competency regulations. We do anticipate bringing proposed language and amendments for consideration by the board, hopefully in the upcoming March and June 2024 board meetings. I'll also kind of go into those in further detail when we discuss the 2024 rulemaking calendar as well. We'll go over our anticipated proposed timeframes for those.
Okay, I noticed on page 57 that the note underneath continuing competency said that it was placed on the 2023 rulemaking calendar that was adopted in December of 2022, which is true, but it was also adopted in 2021.
It was, yes.
But that's not here, which isn't really my point. My point is, when the board adopts a rulemaking calendar, what is the time frame for getting language started? Because it's been since December 2021.
So the rulemaking calendar is really a feature of the Administrative Procedure Act. And I think the legislative intent by that is to give the public notice of what all state agencies, departments are considering in terms of the regulatory process for the next year. So they're filed by every state entity, so there's literally probably hundreds of those over at the Office of Administrative Law. They're made public on their website. But the document and the rulemaking calendar does not impose any actual limitations or requirements on the board or any other state entity to make the regulatory process that's described happen within the course of that year. So it's kind of an ongoing, and it's an ongoing document that is provided to the public. And it is usually better to err on the side of being more inclusive in terms of what you think is going to happen during that year. So it really is a very technical part of administrative law under the Administrative Procedure Act that we do these.
Yeah. And I know that this has been on our radar, but it's also not something that's on fire, I guess you can say. It's something we've been kicking around ideas with, and now we're looking to include it as part of our strategic plan, so it all kind of becomes a little more timely, I guess, if you will.
Well, and to council's point, the calendar in its public display provides the public a very advanced opportunity to be involved in those conversations if they affect them and if they have interest in them. Mm-hmm. It also has an administrative purpose for the Office of Administrative Laws to kind of look at what flow may be coming their way, and it helps them in the way that they divvy out their resources, their staffing, those kind of things. In my experience, there are kind of two strategies you can take with the calendar. You can be very thorough and list everything that might possibly be or have action taken on it for that year. Or you can take a very conservative approach and only list the things that you know will be addressed. And there's some strategy to play with that. In doing that, and also to council's point, there's nothing binding about this calendar. It will not prohibit us from taking actions that might arise within the year that we don't have any awareness of currently. New legislation that would, impose new regulations, or some kind of societal issue that imposes new regulations. At the same time, in this case, it also doesn't enforce that we have to take action on something that's not on fire, to your point, with continuing competency. But we want to keep that question of that issue alive in the public eye so that they know that it's something that's still on our radar. It gels nicely with strategic planning and opening that conversation. When we get to the next, I'll kind of add a little bit more detail for the calendar itself. But the report here is, while we know that we've been looking at our current continuing competency regulations which are, again, in some ways aren't very old, but kind of are very old. Like, the inception of the regulations for continuing competency is a little past 10 years now. And so how are we doing? Right? Are there kind of tweaks or fine tuning that we want to make to it, to our stakeholders' benefit, to the consumer's benefit, and to what are we seeing as input that we've received from those stakeholders, and trying to account for that as well. That's the part that gels very nicely with that kind of strategic plan goal, that we know we have some ideas that we want to do for continuing competency. So
This is very helpful for me, even though I've been on the board for quite a while now. Just, the rulemaking process has kind of it was stale during COVID, you know, and it's good to know that just because we put something on the calendar doesn't mean that action needs to be taken, is going to be taken yet.
Correct.
One of the things to keep in mind when you're talking about, and this kind of goes back to the legislation report a little bit, legislative and regulatory change should not happen rapidly by nature, right? I mean, it can, and in emergent situations, it will. We have emergency regulation authority when we need to do those kind of things. But just by the nature of the change of law, it should have a very kind of steady ebb and flow, not spiky hills and valleys, right? So is it slow sometimes? Yeah, it's frustratingly slow sometimes. But that's kind of the nature of it.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments from board? Public comment? Okay, hearing none, thank you, Brooke. We move on to item number 24, discussion and possible board action on the 2024 rulemaking calendar.
And so to reiterate what we just discussed regarding the calendar, Government Code Section 11017.6 does require all agencies to annually submit a calendar of anticipated regulatory changes and the time frame in which they expect to submit those changes to OAL, which allows OAL to obviously prepare for their workload for the anticipated coming year. So at each December board meeting, the board does take a look at our rulemaking calendar and adopts that, which sets forth our rulemaking plans for the upcoming year. And that is published by OAL. So for the 2024 rulemaking calendar, you'll see there's two schedules. Under Schedule A, proposed regulations implementing statutes enacted during 2023. We are not recording any proposed rulemaking. And then under Schedule B, proposed regulations implementing statutes enacted prior to the year 2023, we are proposing to include the continuing competency regulations, and we are anticipating those to be two separate regulatory packages. The first package will address proposed amendments to our existing continuing competency regulations. And as you see there are some projected dates that we've put in there, and of course those can be subject to change depending on how long it takes us to go through the proposed language process. But the projected adoption date basically means the date that the language is adopted by the board. And that projected date for the first package, we've put June 2024. So at the June 2024 meeting, we're hopeful that we'll have language adopted by the board, or at least going towards that direction. The projected public notice date would always be maybe a month or two after that at least to get the file together. And then the projected to OAL for review date would be February 2025. And that we have a couple more levels of review, obviously, so that kind of incorporates all of those review times. The second regulatory package will address the continuing competency approval agency fees, as we discussed during our strategic plan the other day. And we have a projected adoption date by the board of September 2024, a projected public notice date of December 2024, and then a projected to OAL review date of May 2025. And again, they are projected dates, and they are always subject to change. And as we begin the regulatory process, hopefully we'll kind of stick along those lines, but they can always change.
And I'll just add, as discussed, about the use of the calendar for the public's notice and for OAL's use of resources. These dates that are here, while they're projected in the best case scenarios, right? So that we are providing enough notice both to the Office of Administrative Law, but to the public, that these are the earliest dates this could possibly take action. Please, if you are interested, here is your invitation to the conversation. I will tell you that, at first glance, I want to emphasize that those are at best case scenarios, that this information will be provided by those dates. So,
What is the likelihood that there would be a public hearing request?
I think for the continuing competency, the kind of tweaks to that, it's kind of a 50-50 chance there may be. I mean, it depends on, without giving a peek behind the curtain too much, the proposals that will be provided by staff to board members will not have any kind of very substantive change in the sense that it will impact licensees negatively. If anything, it will probably make it easier for them. So I don't see a hearing request coming as a result of that. Anytime you put the word fee into a regulatory package, you may absolutely have a request to have a hearing, in which the hearing is, while it may be a formality, it serves a very real purpose in the ability to have those kind of open discussions in a meeting like this where, concerns, issues can be aired out. And I think you've heard me talk about the regulatory process when we're doing outreach for consumers and licensees. We want that input. We want that, that stakeholder, those ideas, the things that we may not have thought of or, had concern with ourselves, but that opinion can very, sway where we go from that point. But also provide an informational value to those consumers and those licensees that are looking at that regulation and what those concerns are, the opportunity to provide explanation, and just clear the air a little bit. So, and I'd rather have that happen as part of the regulatory process than as a critique of the regulatory process after it's happened.
Forgive me, because I didn't notice the last statement at the bottom about the completeness of rulemakings on prior calendars. Do I remember incorrectly that the continuing competency was on last year's calendar?
It was.
It was, but no language was ever provided. So while it was on
So
the
it's not
calendar-
an uncompleted rule?
Correct.
Thank you.
Jason, when staff brings language forward for Schedule A, will that include stakeholder feedback, in whatever you bring to us in form of like anecdotal comments that the CC unit hears and or survey that staff has given to licensees?
So the difference between Schedule A and B
Yes.
is Schedule A would be new regulations that are being proposed as a result of new legislation that passed within that year. So like some of the bills that we talked about with maybe the dead naming bill, if that dead naming bill had in its legislation had demonstrated necessity for new regulations to be promulgated, that regulation package would be listed on Schedule A.
Gotcha.
So that the Office of Administrative Law and the public know
Okay.
that this new law is actually already, provided enough information to us that we know beforehand we need to create regulations as a result.
I gotcha.
An example of that would have been AB 2138 when we had to redo the laws pertaining to applications and criminal history. We knew as soon as that legislation passed that we were going to have to amend regulations as a result of that. And that put 2138's regulatory packages on Schedule A.
Okay. So,
Schedule B is just continuing competency's been on the books for 10 years, but we've identified that there's some room for change there. And so it's kind of a lower expectation to the public. We want to separate them. One is really based on new legislation, and the B is just
Yeah.
current legislation.
And just to piggyback off that too, and many times when a bill is passed, there is, if it does require regulations, there is a time frame, so that, regulatory proposals need to be finished by July 1st. So that way it just kind of notifies OAL that this is an important regulatory package, and we have a dead date basically that they need to be promulgated by.
okay, thank you. So, my question is really getting at stakeholder feedback prior to submitting proposed language to the board.
With Schedule A sometimes, and we've only had a few examples of that have affected us over the last 10 years, getting stakeholder feedback sometimes is hard to do until language has been introduced, right? And so it's kind of just a matter of the mechanics and the sequence of the events. So when that legislation is imposed, that's usually a hotly debated item in and of itself, right? So the public is aware of it because of the law and the legislation debate that had led up to that point. So when the regulations come in, sometimes the stakeholders' voice has already been heard in the implementation of the law. And this is just kind of the regulatory is just kind of the technical implementation of that law. But as soon as that language is presented to the board as a recommendation and the board adopts it, we enter into a very lengthy process of checks and balances of, 45-day comment periods, and we have to take into account those comment periods. Those will affect the package. That may turn into another comment period. So, again, highly encourage the public and the stakeholder groups to participate in that process. We need that input, but I'm also confident there's more than enough time for them to have that conversation as well.
About specifically continuing competency.
Continuing competency, I think, is relevant in the sense that we had a very robust task force that created the competency regulations or beforehand. Part of this process here is whatever the proposals are for staff that we provide to the members, that interaction might even result in a new task force being formed, kind of thing. And so that's why I say it's the very best case scenario that we put it on the calendar here with these dates. That's the simplest form. But the conversation can be quite complex, and it might, our recommendation to the board may say, through that decision process, we do need to form a task force. That task force can be comprised of those stakeholder members, which will just kind of lengthen the time process that it might take. And so that conversation might lead us to this conversation, same time next year when we're talking about the 24 calendar and so on and so forth. So.
I know that, well, I can imagine that those staff members working in continuing competency have already received feedback from licensees. And I was wondering, is there an additional survey that's ever been given to licensees regarding CC? Similar to the survey that we've had with, applicants and that sort of thing.
There hasn't been a survey created for that, and it's definitely something that we might find necessary to do in a result of that conversation. But no, not up to this point. To your point, staff, both in the continuing competency unit, and I would say even at that point in the applications unit and the licensing unit and the enforcement unit, and then in the executive unit with legislation and regulation, are all also aware of having conversations regarding our CC regulations and what tweaks or changes might be nice to have or might make the system a little bit smoother and that kind of thing. For the most part, we have a very, I would say, beautiful set of continuing competency regulations. The tweaks that we're proposing are kind of, I wouldn't say nuisance, but could be nicer, right? Could be more administratively smoothed. So not too controversial. Having said that, when we enter into that conversation through stakeholder feedback and the board, we might find otherwise.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Any further comments from the board? Any?
Well, we do need a motion just to adopt this section of the calendar.
Thank you.
And I believe there's a proposed motion on page 60.
I move to adopt the 2024 rulemaking calendar as required by Government Code 11017.6.
I second.
Any further discussion? Public comment? Let's take a vote.
Tanya McMillian,
Aye.
Dale Armstrong. Dale Armstrong is absent. Karen Brandon,
Aye.
Katarina Ellaby,
Aye.
Sam Q,
Aye.
Felicia Beneman.
Aye.
5-0, motion carried.
Thank you. Moving on to item 25 on your agenda, communication and education updates.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is April Beauchamp. I'm the Communication and Education Liaison within the Executive Unit. I am responsible for all of the PTBC's outreach, all of our communication through social media, the website, our email blasts, publications. I maintain all of our forms and publications, for example, the PTBC progress notes. And currently I'm working on the PTBC's communication policy and workforce succession plan. And today I will be presenting the outreach report. For the website in fiscal year 2023-24 quarter one, the PTBC had 163,510 web hits through its website page tabs, and that resulted in a 14% increase from last fiscal year, quarter one. Also, the new website was launched in September, and we have created a survey for stakeholders to give us feedback on it. To access the survey, you can go to any of our social media platforms, and the link and QR code are there. And then it'll also be posted in our winter 2023 progress notes that are set to come out later this month. And then for Facebook, the PTBC received 46 likes this fiscal year. And although on the statistical report it shows it as a decrease, it's not actually a decrease. It's because new likes come up every quarter. It's just a moment in time how many people like the page or like content, things like that. And they are steadily going up. In comparison to last fiscal year, there was an increase of 100% in page visits due to page visits doubling, and then an increase of 34% of page reach, which is the number of people who saw any content from our Facebook page. This fiscal year, quarter one, the PTBC had a 29% increase in page reach for Instagram and a 22% decrease in profile visits in comparison to last fiscal year. When looking at TikTok stats for fiscal year 2023-24 quarter one, we had 3,041 new video views or impressions, and that resulted in a 166% increase compared to last fiscal year quarter one. And then we also had 14 new followers and 11 new likes this quarter. When looking at Twitter stats, the PTBC had an increase of people reached by 34% and a 28% decrease of page engagements compared to last fiscal year quarter one. Twitter also had 11 new followers. And then LinkedIn had 1,232 page reach impressions, resulting in a 31% increase compared to last fiscal year quarter one. LinkedIn also had 91 page visits, which resulted in a 469% increase compared to last fiscal year quarter one, and 22 engagements, which resulted in a 47% increase. For outreach workshops and webinars, the PTBC provided 8 virtual and in-person outreach workshops to 7 PT and PTA programs this quarter. On September 6th, the PTBC attended the Education, Credentialing, and Resource Fair at the Fort Irwin Army Base in San Bernardino. And this was to provide resources and licensing information to the Fort Irwin community. And then we also attended the CPTA annual conference on October 7th and 8th in Long Beach. And that is the outreach report. Do any members have any questions?
Are we gonna change the name Twitter to X?
Yes, we're working on that.
I have a question for you, April.
Yes.
You mentioned you're working on a workforce succession plan. What is that?
So I think we talked about it when we were going over the strategic plan, having a succession plan in place. It just talks about like the number of people that work for the board that are close to retiring, and it's all about like cross training and you know what the next steps are to replace people as they retire. It looks at a turnover rate and all of that kind of stuff, and then breaks down it's really interesting actually. It breaks everybody down by like the different generations, and so it's looking at all of that and what our plan is going forward to make sure that we stay staffed.
Hi, April. Just wondering about the choices for the school's outreaches and what the goal is.
Choices as in
The decisions for which schools to go to.
Oh, I contact every school that has a PT
And
or
these are the
PTA
ones that
program.
responded. These are
Correct.
the ones that said they want you to come.
Yes, and
Okay.
so far we have 42 CAPTE accredited, and then there's 3 that are coming up right now. And so out of those 42, we've been to 41 schools
Okay.
so far. So this is just the ones that we went to this quarter.
This
but
quarter.
we're constantly going to every school, and it just depends on when it's best for their cohort when they schedule them. So like some schools schedule every February, some schools schedule every March or every June or just whenever is convenient for them.
And what's the goal of going to the schools? Just to clarify, because I had an idea I wanted to.
Just to educate them on the application process, the laws and regulations. Our biggest thing is answering any questions they have, kind of like the student Q&A yesterday. We do that at the end of all of our presentations too.
Okay. I asked that because I didn't know what the process was in determining it. Of course, it's like wherever you're invited, right? I mean, if you've reached out to all the schools, but in looking at our pass rate regarding the non-accredited schools, that is lower, and I just and specifically in laws and regs, and I was just wondering if there could be some attention maybe geared towards those schools, knowing that they need a little bit more support too.
Oh, absolutely.
You
We
know.
do visit the schools that are like up for accreditation that we can see on CAPT's website, like whether they're in the process. And we've done 2 of those already. Unitech, who came yesterday, they're a non-accredited school right now. They're working on their accreditation, and we just did a presentation for them 2 months ago.
All right, I just have to kind of interject a point of clarity here, though. When we refer to the non-accredited schools pass rate for the examinations, that's specific to foreign-trained applicants coming in from outside of the U.S. or Canada.
Oh, it's everything.
Right, so if I was going to try to do outreach for those
No.
schools, we'd have a large international travel expense.
No, for sure.
So, but having said that, a good example of our intent was the demonstration that you saw yesterday with Unitech. So Unitech is in their first cohort of CAPTE accreditation, and we've already reached out to them to establish this outreach. So the goal really is to at least provide one presentation to every graduating cohort for a California school. That's hard to do because there's no mandate in the CAPTE accreditation for educational programs in the state to provide any kind of outreach as it pertains to the application process within the state. There's no guarantee that somebody at Unitech or Sac State or the University of Pacific after graduation is going to try to obtain licensure in the state of California. They may be going anywhere else in the United States for that matter. But we, kind of like a pesky salesman, are knocking at every door at every opportunity to kind of interject ourselves opportunistically to deliver our message, but also to help them with this process in the application process, the roles and responsibility of the board, why professional regulation exists, with the idea of kind of making it a little bit more humanized. Not the big bad regulator that we say, but also the necessity of what we do, and letting those students, our future applicants, our future licensees, understand why we even exist and what makes us maybe different than the professional association or the other avenues that they may have in contributing back to their profession. Having said that, I don't know of any. Well, I've learned of a few new cohorts that we were not aware of potentially here in the future, but now that we know of them, we'll be that pesky salesperson knocking on their door.
Yeah, you're right. We can't guarantee that everyone trained here is going to come here
Right.
and practice and vice versa.
And we have a large population of applicants, if you look through the statistics for endorsement, right, that are coming to California that are licensed in another state already, or new graduates coming from outside, universities and education programs outside of California. And we have not, nor have plans, because of the kind of cost expense that might incur, to look at that just yet. We really need to kind of get our in California state outreach program to a point where it can demonstrate more than just anecdotally that it's something worth expanding to outside of that. I guess an example would be if we had a large influx of licensees being, coming from a specific university in a different state. Is that worth an investment in doing an outreach event online with them to walk them through the California process? Is there something trendy about that particular school always sending applicants to California? And that data is starting to become available to us. So that might be, part of that analysis in the future. Right now, we're just trying to do that with every California school in the meantime.
I'm not sure this is for you, April, probably more for Jason, but in the past, we had a conversation about possibly doing high school career days. Any further conversation?
There is still further conversation with that, also not with just us, but also within the Department of Consumer Affairs and succession planning and those kind of things, where there's there's still an opportunity for the regulator to participate in that conversation. I think the majority of that kind of conversation lies at the association level because it's that kind of advocacy for the profession. But the same way that we want to get to the students early, we may also want to get to those, high school students that may be trying to make those decisions and moving into a certain or a specific profession. And again, that goes with not just the PTBC, but all of the other boards and bureaus underneath the Department of Consumer Affairs. And that also kind of gels nicely with the idea of strategic planning and the workforce succession idea, not just for PTBC, but for the profession that we license, that we govern, is that the more information that we can provide and the clearer that we can make that in the decision, maybe that will garner more licensees coming to and deciding to become physical therapists or physical therapist assistants. Also kind of has a DEI connection. And in that conversation, the more that we can be involved, the better. And more demonstrative of our commitment towards that. So yes, but it also goes with that consumer side of the outreach connection that we talk so much about in strategic planning, is so that now that we've established a fairly good structure with the education programs and even with the licensee and the professional association, trying to kind of deliver our message to the consumers about who we are and why we exist and how we can benefit them, that conversation can kind of also include that kind of high school and earlier education. It'll be experimental. We'll have to see how it goes.
I mean, because honestly, I have mad respect for the practitioners on this board, but I didn't know much about physical therapy until I became a member of this board, and I don't hear any youth, especially in high school, saying, "Hey, I want to be a physical therapist."
They're there.
I'm aware. I'm saying me personally.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Especially somebody who works with you.
Right.
All the
It's a way of
years.
trying to make that voice
Exactly.
louder,
Exactly.
right? And then a good example of that conversation and the rationale behind it involving the regulator there would be, not just physical therapy, but when we talk about healthcare and the consumer perspective and who they're seeing, who their practitioners are, there are multiple categories, right? Is it a physical therapist or was it an occupational therapist? Was it an acupuncturist? Was it a chiropractor? Like, they're all wearing scrubs and they're all very nice and they're all providing me healthcare. But I don't know who they're licensed by or who they're governed under. And so that education is still very essential and very necessary. We just have to figure out where we fit.
Right.
It's a new idea.
Get in where you can fit in.
That's right.
Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I do. I like the conversation that's being had right now, and I would encourage the board to just continue to keep that DEI lens in mind if we do go into reaching out to high school students. Yeah, there are some high school students who know they want to go into physical therapy, but there's still some who just have no idea of what it is, or they feel like it's out of reach. I met a college graduate working for Enterprise Rent-A-Car who had a kinesiology degree. She's African American, and she had many other African Americans in her cohort in the kinesiology program. And she said, we thought, oh, we can't do that, so we're just going to go into teaching, or we're just going to go into such and such. And there's an opportunity there, definitely for the association, but possibly for us too. So we can just keep that in mind as we develop the strategic plan and move forward with outreach. Another question for you, April, is how do you decide whether you're going to give an in-person or virtual presentation?
It's really up to the program directors when they schedule them, and then also our scheduling too. So sometimes it'll coincide with like a week that we have a board meeting. And our board meeting's in like Southern California, and they're in the Bay Area, and they want us to come the day before. Well, we don't want to ever turn people away or say, no, we can't do it because we have this going on. So then we will say, well, what about virtual? Yeah. So it's really depends on scheduling and things like that. Or sometimes we have a school on like Wednesday and they're in Southern California, but then Thursday it's, in the Bay Area, or it's, in Sacramento. And so we try to just fit them all without having to turn anybody away, because That's one of our goals. We try not to tell a school no, we can't do it.
So this is going to be a little bit further explanation, but kind of more of this weird shameless plug. I'll just say that up front. It's kind of a two-step process, right? The first step being what the schools will allow us to do. And then the second is kind of our resources and what we have available to us at the time. But we've had some assistance in the past with like clinical education coordinators and kind of getting into those groups and having them talk amongst themselves and kind of playing with the idea of could we get a situation maybe in a geographical area in Southern California where we could do 2 or 3 programs at the same time in the same trip. It could be multiple sessions, but that could save us some money when it comes to travel expenses. We have online delivery methods now that we can utilize too. And our online delivery methods are excellent, but there's no replacement for that real face-to-face interaction, especially when it comes to like time and commitment, the ability to answer questions. But if I could get 2 or 3 programs in a single day or 2 or 3 programs in the same location at the same time, I want to kind of, and that's the shameless plug. So that for the educators on the board that help me with those connections, sometimes we're going to continue to try to do that.
Nice. I will say that I've been on the board long enough now to see us transition our outreach program as well as onto Breeze with our application unit and the presentations that board staff gives. It's just a win-win. It's a win for the students because they get their questions answered. The clarity of the process of applications is enhanced, and again, they learn about who we are and what we do. They get to answer questions. It seems that when the board has come to University of the Pacific, there's always at least one student who will approach board staff with a personal question that goes a little bit deeper, and they get that one-on-one service right then and there. So very valuable, and thank you for continuing to push those and do those. And I have a question about social media.
Yes.
How do we assess the effectiveness of our social media campaign? When we look at the statistics, we might see 45 likes in 3 months, right? However, you might yield something really big from that. So how do we assess the effectiveness of our social media campaign?
Well, by looking at the statistics, it's kind of hard. I know we talked about it with the strategic plan to determine which category of people or stakeholders, the one liking it or looking at it. But really, it's just the numbers, and that's how I assess it. For example, I posted a TikTok video last night, and it's already received over 700 views by this morning. So, just looking at the numbers, really, it's what tells us with that. And if people comment, that too, the likes we get on a post, things like that.
For us, there's a lot, and I was going to kind of touch on this a little bit. The data that she's giving you about social media is overwhelming. Mm-hmm. It's granular, it's very detailed, but what does it all mean? Mm-hmm. And there are some basic kind of concepts to apply to social media that apply to kind of the general idea of advertising, right? So when we're saying impressions, that's the number of times that, a car has driven past a billboard on the highway, right? Or a commercial that was aired on a TV station, right? So that's kind of the similar nature of that. How many times did our content hit somebody's mobile device screen? And when I say that, it means it could have been while they just scrolled right past it, right? But that counts. It's still, a statistic. The statistics still can be deceiving in a sense, and I'll pick on Ms. Beauchamps a little bit. The explanation she provided about the Facebook likes, when that number is demonstrated as being a decrease over last Q1, Ms. Beauchamps takes that to heart as though there are less people that like us today than there were last year. When the reality is, in last Q1, there were 83 people that liked us, and in this year, it's less, but it's still more than liked us last year, right? It's a consolidation and compounding over time. It's just we didn't have the same amount of increase in this Q1 that we did in Q1 of last year. And social media is finicky. We're going to lose followers throughout the year. People do those kind of clearing things where they just unlike stuff because they've got way too much content coming through their pages and they unlike it. But it's just data, right? We just have to take that data and make the best decisions that we can with it. There's no empirical rule.
So what would you verbalize is the goal of our social media campaign?
Reaching stakeholders,
With
anybody.
what?
With just all of the messaging that comes with it, whether it's like board meetings. We're telling the last 3 days I did social media posts about, what's going to be discussed at the board meeting in hopes that public would, come in. And so yeah, just reaching people with any information. If there's a regulation change, if there's a new law, or, even with the students, like I'll post pictures of the students, like, thank you UOP for having us today, in hopes that other school program directors will see it and be like, oh, they went there, wait, let me contact them and, get them to come to our school, things like that.
If you play it out kind of 10 years into the future of today, right, you might find that the social media channels have become more defined, right? I think to your point is the goal of the social media, first and foremost, is to capitalize on the free advertising nature of social media. But at some point, will we have a social media channel that is dedicated to consumers? Will we have a social media channel that's dedicated to applicants? You might. It might evolve to that point. At this point, we're taking all the content that we think we can provide, and that's becoming more and more as we move through this. And we're kind of giving it to everybody. We're writing it in the voice that it's beneficial to the consumer, but we're also writing it in the voice that's beneficial to the applicant, which also is beneficial to the consumer, because it's nice for the consumer to be able to see what the education for a physical therapist looks like, and to the voice of the licensee, which is also benefit to the applicant and benefit to the consumer, and so on. So the ultimate goal is really word of mouth. It's really just to get as much information out to as many people as possible, for them to digest it, to generate that kind of conversation, to teach us a better way to do that in the future.
Thank you. And I think this will be my final question, and it's about the e-blasts. I am the type of person who likes to get e-blasts. And I don't know if it's going to my spam, but I'm just not getting much, But I'm wondering, how often do you send out e-blasts? And is there an opportunity there to possibly do more?
I think there's always an opportunity to do more, definitely. We send them out for every board meeting with the agenda. We send them out every time progress notes come out, anytime there's a regulatory change, anytime a new law is issue, anytime really that there's anything important that's coming out. We just sent one out about military. So we utilize it almost as much, I would say, as social media, but anytime there's anything we really need our licensees, our stakeholders, our consumers to know who have signed up, we utilize it. Our licensee list on there every month, we're adding them in there too, so we keep it updated as well with who gets them.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
And there's opportunity for stakeholders and consumers to sign up for that same process. I was going to use the military as a good example because we've used eBlast for all of the formal communications that this board issues, agendas, materials, rule changes, statutory changes, those kind of things. The military portal was kind of a DCA department-wide message that was sent out, and we decided to not only put that out on social media, but also put it through the eBlast also. It affects us, it affects our licensees, but the double benefit is all the consumers that may have applied to receive that information and be part of that interested parties list also received it. How we can kind of expand that, while you might be someone who loves to receive the e-blasts, and it doesn't seem like you're getting very many, is because the reality is we don't send very many, right? We send probably one a month on average.
And so for those stakeholders, including myself, who are not receiving them, do we need to sign up again?
Maybe. It's
Because
possible.
I'm not seeing it even in spam.
So if we don't have your correct email address on file, And I believe that we should have multiple email addresses for
I've
you
never changed my
on
email.
file.
Yeah,
We'll have to verify it.
okay.
So, and there's two things with that. For licensees, it's a little bit different than it is for public stakeholders. Public stakeholders provide their information voluntarily. My licensees, when they reveal their email address to us, we utilize that for that communication purpose. So they're subscribing to it. They can unsubscribe. And this is important, right? That's part of the feature. If you've ever received an e-blast, there's a choice if you don't want to receive this messaging in the future. That choice is more for those consumer stakeholders that signed up for it and have an opportunity to unsubscribe. But the mechanic is still provided there for my licensees. And they will, and they do. And we receive a little notification that, you know, this is the list of people who unsubscribe from you. We refresh that as we issue new licenses, and we add in our licensing population again. So I might have licensees who are kind of annoyed that they keep unsubscribing from my list, and I keep adding them back into it. But that's also a regulatory requirement for my licensees to provide to us an email address so that we can use it for communication purposes. So there's a little hiccup between what technology can and provides and versus what the law says about our regulation and the email address requirements for licensees. The fact that you didn't get it is we'll have to look more into spam filters and that kind of thing, but also what email address do we have for you on file as a licensee? You should be getting it two ways. You have a DCA email address that would be being delivered to as well.
I don't get it. Yeah, we'll look at it. No more questions, but just want to thank you for all that you're doing. I know you work hard, and I know you take this to heart, so thank you.
Thank you.
April, I know it feels like we're holding you hostage here this morning, but I am super big with QR codes. And
Yes.
I know that we have QR codes. Do we have any way of tracking how the QR codes are working with our outreach? Is that possible?
We don't, there is a methodology that you can use to do it. Like the example would be the board's website, right? So we have a URL, ptbc.ca.gov, and we created a QR code based off of that. How people get to that URL, whether they type it in or the QR code, is not distinguishable. But we could create a second URL
Yeah.
that might be ptbc2.ca.gov, create the QR code for that, and then when people go to that, we would be able to see the difference between somebody typing in PTBC or using the QR code. And we thought about that. That's a lot of structure to kind of implement just to determine that. We utilize QR codes a lot, right? So in the back of the room, one of the cards that we have has 8 different QR codes. Maybe more than 8 now at this point.
I think it has 8, but we have more than 8.
Yeah, okay.
It has 8, but we also have one for like our school presentations. We have one that it needs to be updated, but it would take you to the old page on the website where the application process was at. So I mean, we use them a lot, a lot.
We use them to bookmark documents, the model guidelines, the guide to the laws and regulations has its own QR code, those kind of things, so that we can make those documents in conversation as kind of accessible as possible. But yes, we're looking at that and the idea of tracking that, but we kind of have to determine necessity and resource and see if we'll try it, and if it bears out and that's a good and measurable statistic for performance, we'll continue down that road.
And my last thing, so I love the new studio. Maybe you might want to think about doing a monthly podcast.
That is in the works. Now that the studio is up, we're gonna be rolling out. It's called PTBC TikTok, but TALK instead of TOK, and you guys will be doing the first one today.
Thank you, thank
You're
you, thank you. Any more questions from the board? Any public comment? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 26, our administrative services update. Alicia.
Good morning.
Morning.
So keeping in alignment with the administrative services update, we'll go ahead and begin number A, letter A, staff introductions. I'll go ahead and start with myself. My name is Alicia Hernandez, and I am the lead analyst for the Administrative Services Unit. I am pleased to announce that I passed my probation as of August. So that means I've been with the PTCB family for 9 months now. Time has certainly definitely flew. During the last 9 months, I have been very productive, and I want to first begin by thanking the administrative unit staff for all the support that our team has provided. With that said, I serve as your budget analyst and backup support to 3 amazing individuals. Julie Tao, who is not here today, and I'll share with you in just a moment about that, Vincent Azar, and of course, Timothy Davis. Although maintaining budget review trends is primarily my responsibility, it also comes with tasks under administrative unit. For example, contracts, business services, purchasing, facilities, and records management. In addition to that, again, I want to thank this staff for their communication, everything they've done over the last 9 months. You have been awesome rock stars. To the best of my ability, I will continue focusing on our mission and vision. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Timothy Davis, which was really the roll call, but unfortunately, I am going to have him be Julie Tao today.
Oh, you're gonna have me beat Julie?
Julie, unfortunately, is out today. She has an ill child, so I apologize on her behalf, but we will share her roles and responsibility.
So Julie handles, she's in the process of training to be the board's, no, she's already the personnel liaison now.
Yes.
So for the PTBC, she serves as the board's personnel liaison, training liaison, and travel liaison. The personnel liaison is responsible for resolving various complex and sensitive documentation and memos. She prepares and follows up with classification and recruiting, personnel transaction, health and safety requests, concerns, and questions. She develops requests for personal action packages and researches and analyzes discrepancies on staff's leave balances, everything she does. Research consultant assists employees in preparing health, dental, vision, flex, elect, and employee action request forms. She processes and advises employees regarding catastrophic leave, FMLA, NDI, workers' comp forms and requests. For training liaison, she consults with and assists staff and management to enroll in training classes and complete the necessary documents and forms, coordinates with DCA Solid to schedule training. As her role as a travel liaison, she provides recommendations to employees and management regarding travel policies and procedures, reviews travel claims and supporting documents for completeness and accuracy, and advises employees on travel policies and procedures, making travel arrangements for employees and management. So that is Julie Tao. For my role, my current duties are to provide administrative support in the areas of cashiering and procurement. I also handle a lot of contracts, and I also have a hat as facilities lead. So in my primary role as cashier, I process all the monies received by the board for applications, licensing, consumer protection each day. Other common functions include facilitating revenue refunds, return payment notices, dishonored checks, fund transfer requests. I also keep track of all the statistics to provide monthly, quarterly, and yearly reports for all the monies received from Breeze. I also interact directly with the other analysts at PTBC whenever we're moving money or updating people's applications and just making sure that money is attached to where it needs to be attached to. I also often interact with licensees directly. They'll call in needing a receipt, or they're just asking about their application in some way, making sure that their money came in. In the area of procurement, I research, request quotes, approve and revise proofs, and correspond with vendors while creating purchase orders. And that also includes in relation to contracts and things like that too. And I'm also the BTBC's emergency response coordinator within our suite. So
And he's also our go-to Tim.
if anybody needs anything, you need some coffee, I'll get you your coffee too. So, but that's about it. So
Wait, you do coffee?
if you ask me for it, I'll get you. So go
Without
go
further
ahead,
ado,
Vincent.
we're going to go ahead and pass the baton over to Vincent Azar.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vincent, and as the board's technology liaison, my responsibilities span across various aspects of technology and operational support vital to the smooth functioning of our board. In my role as the board's ADA liaison, I ensure that all digital documents for the PTBC and DCA or for the PTBC are accessible, aligning with the ADA and AB 434, Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act standards. The responsibility is crucial for making our content accessible to a diverse audience. As an IT liaison, I act as a main point of contact for all IT-related business operations. This includes coordinating with DCA's Office of Information Services for support, setting up and maintaining workstation cubicles, and providing necessary training to end users. My asset management duties are focused on IT-related equipment. I am tasked with the upkeeping, tracking, and auditing of the assets, ensuring they are effectively distributed and logged for use by staff and board members. I also provide graphic design and video editing support for our board as required, creating visually appealing and effective content for our communications and presentations. Building and maintaining reports is a key part of my duties as well. These reports not only aid in decision-making, but also assist our office in streamlining processes, enabling us to use time more efficiently and effectively. As a telecom liaison, my role involves managing telecom business operations and coordinating with the department, with DCA for telephone services. Additionally, I manage WebEx meetings for the board, handling and preparation of facilitation of these virtual meetings in collaboration with the solid moderator. Another important aspect in my role is creating and maintaining security badge access for our office within the building, ensuring secure access to our facilities. In my capacity as the board technology liaison, I am dedicated to upholding the highest standards in ADA compliance, IT asset management, graphic design and video editing, IT and telecom operations, and facilitating effective virtual meetings. My focus is always on leveraging technology to enhance the operational efficiency and the effectiveness of the board. That's all for me. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you for all you do.
Thanks.
Vincent, do you think we could get some filters for those pictures on those ID cards?
Good luck into that.
No.
You want some bunny ears?
Well, thank you guys for everything that you do. And in Julie's absence, I do want to, you guys pray for her and Kim, because they have to work with me. And I have the worst with submitting things. So kudos for everything that you guys do.
Thank you, we appreciate that.
Any comments from board members? Any public comment?
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and just stay here with Tim, my little support guy, my go-to Tim. I'm gonna go on to item B if I may. Okay, so again, hi, my name's Alicia Hernandez, and I'm reporting on a program update on behalf of my manager, Liz Constancio. Liz would like to thank you for the opportunity and allowing us to present today and give you a little glimpse into the administrative services unit here at the board. Before we begin, just a little background on Liz. She has been with the Department of Consumer Affairs for 26 plus years and worked several boards and bureaus. She started with the Physical Therapy Board in 2011. It's 11 years as of September 2023. As a unit manager, she is primarily responsible for overseeing the day-to-day management and supervision of her staff, directing and developing the unit staff, and working with leadership and the Department of Consumer Affairs on meeting our strategic plan goals and objectives. The administrative unit is an essential part of the board in meeting its core functions: licensing, enforcement, outreach, and organizational effectiveness. The admin unit is responsible for Unique as far as our client customer base. While our client customer base and board members and board staff, we are also responsible for supporting the board in its entirety, such as applicants, licensees, the DCA, stakeholders, and the public. So our program updates for today, I have about 5 of them, and I'd just like to kindly read over those. Our year starts July 1st, 2023, and during the first quarter, admin has been working with the budget office on building its 23-24 budget to better align our budget line items with our projected expenditures. And going into C, I will go in a little bit more detail with that as well. To include changes in duties as a result of our recent reorg that created an executive unit. While we are still getting acclimated and the separation of duties between admin and exec unit, we will still share some responsibilities such as creation, revision of policies, office guidelines, workforce and succession planning, state Leadership Accountability Act, hazard assessment, etc. We look forward to working closely with the executive unit on finalizing the separation of our roles and responsibilities. We started our annual review of equipment and will be replacing and consolidating equipment to enhance productivity or save costs. We are working with the other unit managers to fill vacancies, including completing our recruitment process for backfilling our reception position. Lastly, we would like to thank Pearl Herr for her service with the Physical Therapy Board. We wish her all the best in her luck and in her future endeavors. The administrative unit, the services unit, is responsible for various support services such as budget, cashiering, contracts, procurement, and facilities. The Americans Disability Act, ADA requirements, information technology, records management, mail services, personnel, travel, and training. In her many years with DCA, I have never worked with such a talented and bright group of individuals. I am truly grateful to be a part of a strong team. They understand their roles and responsibility and take pride in doing a good job. And with that said, I will give you the attendance services unit lead, Alicia Hernandez. So I'm going to switch roles. So keep it in alignment with the agenda. I will now go into the budget report, if I may.
I just want to say that for me personally, and I don't know if the other board members feel the same, this is helpful to learn your roles and what you do, because we see you all.
Yes.
We interact with you all.
Yes.
In one way or another, but it's really kind of nice to hear exactly what your duties are, so thank you.
Absolutely. Our pleasure. Okay, so again, Alicia Hernandez, I'm the lead analyst and budget analyst, and I am pleased to present the fiscal year 23-23 budget and review updates for Q1 on behalf of PTC's Administrative Services Unit. As of Q1, the PTBC has a budget of $7,253,000 for the current fiscal year. During this period, we expended approximately 29% of the budget, representing a positive decrease of 104 compared to last fiscal year. This reduction can be attributed to decreases in general services and a slight decrease of around $20K in department services. Additionally, there has been a decrease in personnel services. I just want to make sure that it's important to note that our administrative unit services, along with mentioning Julie Tao's responsibilities and backing her up as our lead, we are working diligently on trying to refill those vacancies. As a matter of fact, we have interviews scheduled for next week to backfill behind our receptionist, Pearl Herr. So with that said, on a positive note, PTBC has contributed to experience increases in revenue collections amounting to $155K in the current fiscal year for 23-24 compared to the prior year in 2023. The increase is particularly notable in license renewals. I am pleased to inform you that overall, PTBC's budget and revenue are in alignment and there are no immediate action required at this time. So again, we did do some alignment, fine tuning. I worked with Liz and the budget office over the course of the last few months during this first quarter to ensure that everything is, going as tacked. And in addition to that, I think I said it in the my first 2 weeks. I went to the first board meeting, and I do watch it on a daily basis, monthly basis, invoices that come in, just to reassure everybody that we're doing well. With that said, I don't have anything. Do you have any questions for me or comments?
I do have a couple of questions.
Certainly.
On the budget. Where's that for? Also the first page,
On expenditures?
on expenditures.
Okay.
I think just from an expectation point of view, those pro rata calculations that are showing 50%. I'm trying to understand if it's 1 quarter, why would it be 50%?
So, you
I can
got
open
it, okay.
Through a process called Galley, when the governor decides the state budget in its entirety, in that Galley process, all of the individual budgets for state agencies are also created, including ours. We're given kind of that final number of what the expectation of our budget is going to be, and then internally we create this display of how we kind of categorize and split up those monies, with the exception of the pro rata, right? So the pro rata is all of the funding that essentially supports the Department of Consumer Affairs, meaning where we receive no taxpayer money, all of our monies is generated by the revenues received from applications and then license renewal fees. We have to contribute some of those monies to support the Department of Consumer Affairs. They have some partial funding through tax money, but the majority of their funding comes from supporting the 38 boards and bureaus below them and the pro rata fees that we collect and push up into the Department of Consumer Affairs. Quarter one is kind of a unique quarter in the sense that we kind of, as a state in its whole, shut down business in the last fourth quarter to kind of close out the books for the fiscal year, which creates a little bit of a backup that will bounce in the quarter one of the next fiscal year because we open shop, we open back up, purchasing starts happening, those kind of things. So you can almost always expect quarter one to be an over expenditure in representation, right? Pro rata even more so because those monies are kind of being transferred to them more diligently, more quickly, because there are things like their salaries are being set aside for those support staff at DCA. Where if you kind of look at some of the things that are more controlled internally by PTBC and in-house, that 25% expectation in quarter one is closer. We still have a little bit of that bounce effect. But in pro rata, it's a lot easier. You know, we set that money ahead. We know that money's going to them anyway. And so it goes much more quickly. So it's not quite static. It doesn't stay that way all the time, but it's not something for us that is unreasonable or alarming. We're used to it at this point. Pro rata is always kind of a heated discussion because being a fiscally responsible and diligent agency, I want to know where all the money's going, whether it's internally and how we spend it and displaying it to you as members, but also the pro rata costs. And we're essentially paying for services. We want to make sure that we get the services that we pay for and that we're not paying too much for the services that we receive.
So is it reasonable to expect that Q4 will be 0 or close to?
Close to, maybe, right? So as you start to get closer towards the end of the year, it shouldn't be. But there are things that are unforeseen expenses that can come up in the business of the year that end up there. And some of those things are kind of like, not to use Breeze as like the bad kind of example of it, but unforeseen expenses in IT projects might kind of skew that number. And we may find circumstances where while we have a black line of what we expect to pay, we go into the red when it's over expense of what's projected and budgeted to spend. It happens, and when we do that, we have to kind of find those monies elsewhere. But by the time you work your way down to that bottom right-hand corner and that bottom line budgeting, as long as I don't exceed that, we're good. And so there are going to be times where I have to rob Peter to pay Paul. It would be like rob travel expenses to pay for IT expenses and so on. So.
I had a question. I had the privilege of completing my orientation as a board member, and they did review the pro rata services that each board pays towards. Could you review that, or anybody review that just briefly? I know that it includes investigation.
Absolutely.
Because we share resources
Correct.
with other. Can you just the fine points
I'm going to do it at a very high level, only because of all the pro rata services that the Department of Consumer Affairs provides. All of the pro rata calculations are different based on the services. And one of those examples would be like the Division of Investigation. They have what we call a 2-year roll forward method, where our numbers set aside in budget are based on the trend history of the expenses that we've paid to the Division of Investigation over the last 2 years, right? We're just trying to measure a trend.
Okay.
But enforcement's interesting because you can never determine ahead of time how many complaints you're going to receive, how many investigations you're going to have to conduct, and how much expenditure into those investigations there are going to be. And so while they're trying to project how much staffing and how many investigators that the Division of Investigation or DFI might have to have, that number is just a plan, right? But we can't be surprised by a number that could really sway our budget and put us into a situation or a position of insolvency. So that 2-year roll forward kind of helps smooth it out over more than one fiscal year. And if we don't spend too much last year and we have some money to revert, we can go back and grab it if we have expenditures that we weren't expecting this year.
It's the best estimate to do the 2-year roll. Okay.
Yeah. And then for IT and human resources and those kind of things, the pro rata calculation might be as simple as how many staff does the Physical Therapy Board of California have? Because that would determine how much billing we would have for things like human resources services. And human resources services being, as members, you had forms, you had training you had to do, you had applications that you had to fill out, and staff do too. And DCA provides all the services for that. So dealing with their month-to-month salaries, their month-to-month collection of dues for their healthcare, for their retirement, for their benefits, all of those things are handled by DCA's Human Resources Unit. And then we pay for that in pro rata for services.
That's under CCS? That's under, Consumer Client Services?
Correct.
Okay.
And so where you won't see us break down those much in our category here, I think in your orientation, they kind of tried to touch on that a little bit and provide the formulas for kind of each category. And so like IT would be something that's more invoiceable, right? They can do direct billing and direct costs to us. And so that's the budget on our side that we have to kind of try to live within the confines of and not overexpend there. But intricate and kind of different when you're talking about trying to look at books and budgeting compared to maybe private industry or something like that. But all of it serving a very real purpose.
Thank you for the refresher.
Just a minor recommendation for for presentation purposes that on the budget report, the last column would you
The
be able to
balance?
make that right adjust?
Sure.
Yeah.
The balance one?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
you got it.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Quite a little try to understand the collection for the licensing renewal. What's the reason this year is so much more than prior years? Is there something else that we did or implemented?
It's actually a weird kind of ebb and flow. The quarter is affected by a couple different factors. One is our license renewals are based on, the expiration is based on the birth year and month of the person that applied. And so you'll see a fluctuation because, I mean, in a very succinct way to say it, more babies are born in certain times of the year than others, right? And so our renewal revenue fluctuates that way also. The cutoff lines, though, can affect that too. And so at a higher level than us with the Department of Consumer Affairs and accountants in their accounting, when those cutoffs happen, we can have an influx of quarter one renewal fees that are typically there somehow kind of made their way to quarter two because a different cutoff was put into place. So it does fluctuate from year to year. It's anomalous, but it kind of evens out over time.
Got it.
So.
Got it. And the cost recovery investigations, I mean, my interpretation is that we really have no control over that, or?
To your point, yes, in the fact that we have control over it in the sense that we need to make sure that we levy cost recovery fees responsibly, right? So in our investigations, when wrongdoing is actually found against our bad actors and our licensing population, that we attribute the cost of that investigation to them as part of that cost recovery, and it's the statutory authority that we have to do that. But part of that consideration has to make sure that the bad action is commiserate, right? You can investigate a lot and find very little, right? And if that's the case, I can't attribute the whole price tag to that person. I can only attribute in ratio what's actually their responsibility. The other factor to keep in mind in cost recovery is their ability to pay. There is a section in the authority where I have to look at their financial hardship and consider that in our estimation of cost recovery and our order of cost recovery. The balance of that is paid by the licensing renewal fees, right? That's the administration of the board, that those constant renewal fees of licensure fund the administration of the program and the balance of the enforcement program that's not captured by cost recovery. So.
Got it. One more question. I don't mean to dig into the hills here. In general, the board, how does the board ensure there's a sufficient segregation of duties in terms of the financial side? Since Alicia actually wears many hats.
She does, but
Yeah.
within the administrative services unit alone, there are a number of protective measures and separation of duties about like who can actually make an order, who can approve of the invoice, and who can actually issue the check for the payment of that invoice. All of those things are dictated by the SAM manual for the state of California. That's kind of held at a more higher departmental level, and we are subject to audit for that as well. We keep that in mind, so I can't order something and then approve that purchase of my own without other staff involved.
Got it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I have a question. What, did I miss something from last meeting? What's the prior year revenue adjustment that's under initial application and license?
So that kind of speaks to that where we shut down in Q4 and then there's kind of a bounce, right? So some of the revenues that were collected in what we would call fiscal month 12 or fiscal month 13, year-end closure of the previous fiscal year, will carry over because in its identity, while we collected it last year, it was for Q1 of this year. You, as licensees, you have, we send out a notice for you to renew your license 90 days ahead of time. And when we do that, that kind of balance. Some people are very proactive and they pay it right when they receive that notice. Sometimes they don't pay it until it's already delinquent, kind of things. And then when that happens, that kind of creates these kind of anomalies in the Q1, Q4 reporting.
How many months in reserve do we have currently?
It was 5.5, I believe, was the last report.
Is it somewhere in our documents?
There is on the
Yes.
report, it does say projected 7 months.
7
Right.
months, okay.
Typically, we also can get a display from Department of Consumer Affairs or Budget's office, and we ask them for a display of that. And I think that's what Kat's referring to, is there's a single document that kind of gives you that
Yeah.
display over time. They weren't able to provide it in this quarter. There's some kind of issues, especially for Q1. And if you remember, we weren't able to give it to you in Q1 last year either. We're waiting for the reconciliations to happen from the last fiscal year to be able to provide them. You'll start to see them. We are aware of them just based in conversations with budgets, however, and I was expecting more like 7-8 months. So, and I'm glad it's in the briefing paper that way, because that's the part that we're keeping in mind. The conversation does lean towards, 7 to 8 months in reserve for members that have tenure and for new members, just for education purposes. As the administrator, I want, for my own level of comfort and my own ability to kind of just have a good night's sleep, a double-digit fund condition, right? I'd like to have 10 to 12 months in reserve. The reason for that is there is a potentiality for unexpected expenditures, right? And that can be on a new enforcement side. That could be subject to lawsuit, that there are things that can happen that aren't part of this budgeting decision. And we should have a certain amount of revenue set aside for operating expenses, and 10 to 12 months is my level of comfort. General rule is if you have more than 3 months of operating expenses set aside, then you're all right. You know, if you go under 3, you should consider increasing your fees. If you get past that 10, 12 and up into 2 years of operating expenses, you should consider reducing your fees because you are financially sustainable for a period of time. We have had the experience of having less than 3 months in a fund condition. We've had the experience of having 3 weeks in a fund condition. And so I've had anxiety, you know, at that level and always worrying about money issues. But since our last fee increase years ago now, we're in a much better financial situation. But we are getting to a point where that fund condition is starting to kind of come down a little bit. We were up to like 10, almost 11, and now we're looking at like 7, 8. But we're also looking at cost-saving measures at every step along the way. And as long as I stay within budget and the revenues kind of match our quarterly costs, then we're living within our means. And I don't really see issues on the horizon for that either.
The projected for 2024, 2025 looks like it's down, but that's only projected.
It's only projected, and the thing about the projections is I can project expenditures much more accurately in the sense that we know inflation is going to happen. We know that overhead costs are going to increase, your rent's going to increase, the cost of your employees' salaries is going to go up over time, their benefits, their retirement expenses are going to go up over time, and we can estimate that fairly well. It's usually 3 to 6% increase per annum. We don't project an increase in revenues that way. We take a straight line. How much did we collect last year and the year before? And the year before that, and use that average to predict. We can expect that next year. This is different because our licensing population is getting bigger. We get more applications. We have the population itself growing. If you have more people renewing licenses, you have an increase in your revenue services, but you don't account for that in your projections. And so that's a very conservative kind of estimate and way to do it. Worst case scenario is if we still get the revenue we got last year, then we'll go from 8 months down to 5.6 as an example.
Is there a disparity between, how much is the disparity between your total cash and your reserve?
I don't know that as far as the fund
cash
condition
reserve,
itself,
I'm sure not 100% of your cash that you're operating on using the reserve, right? So.
Right. So as part of that galley process, that budget sections out that fiscal year money aside. And so this year's budget is not included into that, our fund condition.
Got it. Thank you.
So I appreciate Kat's question because I think we are used to seeing, you know, it a certain way, and I did have to look for this, which is fine. But should we maybe expect that that's going to be a trend for Q1, that we would not see it in that way?
No, I would not want you to expect that. I would want to be able to deliver the fund condition to you in Q1. I just need to make sure that we set that expectation and continue to set that expectation.
Yeah, I mean, at least
I'm not saying that you may not be disappointed in Q1 next year. I'm just saying that we're going to continue to adhere to the expectation of being able to provide it to you.
Yeah, Alicia did a beautiful job putting this all together. I think if I'm correct, probably Kat and I did the same thing, and like that's the first thing we're looking for. Right? We're just going straight to
Fund
the report.
condition.
Like bold it or put it in the front or have that report. Yeah.
It's like the pulse, you know? We just want to know we're alive and how well we're alive.
Understood.
Any further questions, comments from the board?
What is statutory exempt under personnel services?
Me.
Oh, that's you.
That is me. So as the one and only employee of the board that is exempt from civil service, I'm statutorily exempt.
Okay, thank you.
I would highlight one thing. In looking at last year's reports to this year's reports, there were some adjustments made to Alicia and Liz's credit. One of the things that we've looked at is we have budgets set aside that we're trying to estimate our monies on, and we've had some red in previous years when it comes to things like board member per diem or board member travel. And we're trying to kind of provide a better display to the public of how our monies are actually spent. And so that line item has been adjusted here. Where, as you'll see, the board member per diem and the travel allocation set aside is higher than it was for what was set aside in budget in the previous fiscal year. And that's just an adjustment because we know now coming out of the pandemic that we're going back to kind of that normality, right? We travel for board meetings, we're going to incur those expenses.
Any further comments, questions? Public comment, questions? I'm hearing none. Thank you, Alicia.
Of course, thank you for your time, Mr. President.
We are going to take a 10-minute break. And 10:46. So we will return at, let's just come back at 11. Yep.
Where's your gavel? Hit the thing. I'll put myself
Okay, we will resume our place on the agenda. Moving, where's Jason?
Moving on with or without Mr. Kaiser.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 27, our licensing services update.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Valerie Kearney, manager of the Licensing Services Unit. And first, I'd like to apologize. We do have some staff members who could not be here today. Paul Rowe, who is the endorsement and military applications and licensing analyst. Also, Ariana Rathbun, who is the CAPTI accredited PT program new graduate applications analyst. Veronica Gutierrez, who is an analyst in continuing competency, who handles approval agency and licensee audits, and also Alyasha Lamb, who also in continuing competency and handles licensee audits. But we do have 3 staff members here representing the licensing services team, and we're going to begin with Justin.
Hello. Good morning. My name is Justin. Good morning to all of you. I've been a state employee for 32 years. I've been at the Physical Therapy Board now for the last 7 years. I started in 2016. Still here, and it's an awesome place to work. Awesome staff. Everybody's really nice. I'm generally your first person that you talk to when you call the board, and I try to generally steer the applicants or the licensees or any kind of general information. I try to steer the individual in the right direction. You know, being if I'm sending a call to my manager here or some of the analysts, or if I could just simply handle the call myself, I handle all the address changes, all the name changes, the deficiency notices. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of things to list, I guess. I just, that's pretty much what I do. kind of drawing a blank, but I do on a day-to-day basis, I handle like a lot of the little things that pertain to licensing, maintenance. And I guess that's all I got for now, but thank you very much.
And Monet, please.
Hi, my name is Monet Dyson. I am the applications technician here at the Physical Therapy Board. I've been for a little over 2 years. I currently process and review all new grad applications. I also use FSBT to pull exam scores just to verify that they are, on the site, and just making sure that they are taking the exams if they pass or not. And then issuing temporary work status if they are eligible for it. Processing hard card fingerprint requests and mailing them out to applicants that are requesting for them. Answering phones, basic questions, and then forwarding applications to the analysts, because I'm the first person to do intake reviewing all those applications. So, yeah.
Thank you, Monet. And Teresa?
Hello, good morning. My name is Teresa. I've been with the board for a little bit over 10 years. I currently serve as the Foreign Educated PT, PTA applicant analyst, as well as equivalency application analyst. And yeah, so basically everything from start to end for all foreign PT, PTA applications. In response to a question that was raised on our previous board meeting about the evaluation tool that is being used for the clinical service period, the board, since September 2020, the PTBC has been actively accepting the PET, which is the evaluation tool created by FSBPT. And since then, out of all the evaluations received during that period, about 35% were under the PET since September 2020. And then just in the last month alone, 50% of the evaluations received have been using the PET. So we've seen a little bit of an increase there. So
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you very much. And Monet, how long have you been working here?
A little over 2 years.
Yeah, we tweak a lot. And so are you PT and PTA?
Yes.
Yes.
She's intake.
Intake.
So she's responsible for assigning the applications to the analysts. But first, there are some items that she does as well. For example, if you notice on our website about the application process, when it says that you will be notified through your Breeze account, that's Monet posts the official acceptance of the application in the Breeze account for the applicant to see. And then she also matches the certificate of completion P1E form up with the application, and then verifies that they are registered for the NPTE or NPTAE prior to issuing PTLA or PTALA. So she does a lot, and her being as efficient and accurate as she is helps the analysts out a lot.
Yeah, it's an important job because
It
I know
is.
some of the applicants are just biting at the bit waiting for that
Yeah.
PTLA
Yeah.
status or PTALA status. So thank you for doing that. And both you and Justin mentioned that you answer the phones. I know that our new website, well, at our last meeting, our phone number was not on the website. Is that correct? It's on there?
It's on.
Okay.
Yeah, and so when they're all it's just, we changed the way it's delivered. We tried to make it available at each and every panel through the connect to us section.
And so now it's just on contact us? And so then both of you kind of take those calls and make sure they get to where they need to be?
Yeah. Everybody's on the phone in applications. We're the primary source contact for all questions. Justin is primarily when licensees call in, and everybody else, well, except for continuing competency. They also back Justin up and he backs them up. And everyone else is answering the application's phone. So, and Justin was a little modest. He's kind of like Monet, they're jack of all trades for their position. For example, every week we get a report of licensees who are requesting a verification sent to another state, and it's usually pretty extensive, and that's one of his functions. He's probably on the phone about 80% of the day, answering licensees' questions, assisting with name changes, address changes. He also does the return mail, and now as one of the few people who are in-house 5 days a week, he also is responsible for email received inbound. So it's, you know, we all have a lot of functions.
Modest is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Because I did what Justin did.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
Time, everybody asking, what does Jason do? Right? Because when we say license maintenance, we mean, it's not the applications, right? You're not talking about 2,000 to 3,000 applications here. Now you're dealing with the other 35,000 licensees and their renewals and any of the questions they might have about the license and the name changes and the address changes and their continuing competency questions and any of the problems that might arise that Justin then has to interact with the other staff to kind of troubleshoot and problem solve and figure out who they should be talking to. I mean, it gets pretty
Yeah. Keeps me on my toes. You know.
Well, to hear that you're on the phone a good amount of the day, I want to say thank you because
Sure.
I am someone who likes to use the phone, and I think the world is changing. Like a lot of people, things can be done efficiently through email. I'm the type of person who will try that, but then if it's just something that's I'm a little overwhelmed with, I want a voice on the phone. So thank you for being that
Sure.
voice on the phone. And you as well, Renee. And then for foreign educated,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is like dear to my heart, I did look through the report, and kudos to you for getting those processed in the time that it says is average, because I know that foreign educated applications can be very convoluted. And I think the timeline looks pretty impressive, so good work, yeah. Thank you.
All right, if you all want to go ahead and sit down, I'll go finish the my report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the applications unit has been recruiting. It says is at this on this because I wrote it in November. But we have been recruiting for the physical therapist assistant, staff services analyst applications position. That should be complete within another week or two. We also are recruiting, we had a position, the job posting just closed on the 27th of November for an additional staff services analyst for the applications unit. Interviewees should be notified within the next 2 to 4 weeks. So that's in progress. I would like to send kudos out to Paul Rowe. He started doing PTA applications March of 2022, and he has done an extraordinary job balancing, keeping those up to date, and doing his endorsement applications, which can be hard sometimes because a lot of times they're unresponsive, the applicants are, as well as just being right on top of all of the military applications and all the military applications and license processes. He's been doing a wonderful job.
So are you saying he's doing PTA endorsement and military?
Yeah. So he does, his job is endorsement applications, both PT and PTA, and military, active duty, honorably discharged or military spouse applications, and the licensing for those, not just issuing the license, but maintaining their license. That's his primary job, but in March of last year, we needed someone to do PTA new grads, and he took it on himself to do it, and he's just done a great job. Absolutely great.
We appreciate that and him working to efficiently get these things
Yeah.
done for us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to highlight that a little bit, that's why in the previous report, when we were talking about with the vacancies and the patience of the staff and the diligence of still getting the work done, one might ask if then in then it's the case that that work can be done by that number of staff. Right? And that's why I want to emphasize and be very specific that it's not sustainable. We are sacrificing somewhere at that point. And sometimes it is the staff that we are sacrificing when we do that, right? And so for workload, for the number of cases, and we talked about number of cases for an analyst when it comes to investigations and CPS, but you have to still kind of keep that idea in mind with volume that goes to the analysts of licensing and applications as well. While we can maintain it in like short bursts. Right? And so while we have these vacancies, they're taking over and they're making sure that it doesn't bother them. But then there's still going to be the recruitment, bringing on a new staff, the training of that staff, and then getting them up to speed. People actually really, really feel that relief where they're not inundated and overloaded on a day-to-day. And that's the sustainability concern that I just want to kind of highlight.
Yeah, I believe I remember in the past, we talked about having a desk designated to military, and I see that it's a very small percentage of applications, so I thought, wow, endorsement and military together, if that can be done, that makes sense. But PTA on top of that seems like a hefty load.
Well, it's a completely different mindset because endorsement and new grads are just processed differently. So the fact that he can bounce in and out between the two and do them both successfully is really job well done. Absolutely. Application services statistics indicate that application types received in quarter one of 2023-2024 were down somewhat, not a lot, but were down compared to quarter one of the previous year. Interestingly, non-CAPTE accredited PTA applications, which are generally equivalency applications, increased slightly, and by slightly, I think last year, quarter one, there were 3, and this year, quarter one, there were 6. So it just made the whole statistic look enormous. So I thought I'd point that out. Also, new PTA licenses issued increased by 50 for the same quarter. License maintenance continues to improve processing times, as you'll see on the report. For license verification requests, those are interesting because those are initiated through the licensee's Breeze account. Well, as I said, we get a report and then Justin has to manually process those from there. So when you see an improved processing time on that, it just means he's gotten faster. And the processing time for name changes increased by 1 day, but that is largely dependent upon the licensee or the applicant to produce the required documentation in order to complete the name change. And continuing competency licensee audits are ongoing, and as are approval agency audits. And do you have any questions?
I do. For total applications processing times, that very first table on the graph, on the report, is that a total of all the different types of applications, or is that for, well, I guess US educated would be the CAPD.
Yeah, that is total applications overall.
And how is the time measured for, let's say, a CAPD US educated application? When does the clock start and when does the clock stop? I'm assuming that's when licenses
It
issued.
starts when it's paid for.
When it's paid for.
That's when an application is received.
Mhm.
And then it stops when it's either licensed or denied.
Gotcha. I guess I'm thinking because so much of it is out of staff's control. Like, once staff has everything in an application that's complete, including the test score, I would look at like licensing time there, which is probably,
Rather quick.
yeah.
Assuming there are no deficiencies in the application, so there is kind of a chess clock
Mhm.
measurement that's being, calculated there, what's in our control, what's in their control. It's really hard to kind of, to break that down, and in fact, Department of Consumer Affairs has been struggling with this because we all have different licensing models and we all have different requirements and kind of nuanced collection of that data. So the timeline here really speaks to, once all efficiencies are met, how much time do our staff have before another license is actually issued, and that's the measurement you see there. And it's a best estimate, because there's kind of these correspondence that's happening back and forth. You know, here are some of the efficiencies you're asking for, but not quite all of them, okay? And there's another correspondence that goes back out and says, yeah, that's 3 out of the 4 things that we were missing, but we used that 4th thing. And so it's not completely accurate or specific, it's just kind of the best measure that we can kind of see between the time that it was received and the time that it was ended. And I think we're kind of looking at trying to give you that contrast number in the future also, right? So Valerie's point, the majority of applications, the overwhelming majority of applications now are received online. So for that transaction to be processed online and get to us, they have to get past that shopping cart moment where they pay for their fee. And then it comes into our purview. It still has deficiencies, it still has some, items missing. However, we have discovered that there are some very proactive applicants that there are no deficiencies upon payment. Like there's like this little kind of small percentage.
Yeah,
where
they
some
passed
of them
both exams and
passed both
everything.
exams, they're ready to go, their fingerprints are done, passport pictures there, which is good. It just helps our statistic, right? Speaks to the point of the better prepared they are as applicants, the more that they have control of their own destiny and how quickly they can get their license. So, but the contrast would be from the point of application received to license issued is kind of, we are interested in that number. How long does that typically take? Either they're in their control or ours, right? And then we can carve out our little piece of it too. And you can contrast those two numbers and get an idea of how much control the applicant actually has, being proactive.
I like that idea because it also shows our work, the staff's work.
Oh, yeah.
The staff's are,
If you think about it, we already are, right?
Yeah.
That's, the reporting is really accentuating our responsibility. We're giving you that now. We're not so much interested in trying to kind of highlight in kind of a deterrence way, like we're not trying to hide behind how long it takes by saying that it takes the applicant longer. But we do want to be able to put it in perspective, in context, and say the average time it takes for somebody from application to license issue is still a very relevant data point.
Yeah, I'm just thinking for students in my program who take the exam in October in general, you might have someone complete their application or start their application process in July. You might have someone start it in
Right.
August,
Right.
September. And so like this number, I don't know how to look at this number.
As soon as we identify a deficiency in that application, we hit that chess clock that goes back to the applicant's responsibility at that point. And to your point, the examination is not really in the applicant's control. They have to wait to sit because it's only given those 4-time intervals. But that does count to their clock.
That's why I'm kind of looking at this as what data can we see that's really meaningful? Because this kind of is not meaningful because so much of it's out of our control. But anyway.
I think the individual categories processing times would be much more meaningful. Again, there are a few things that are out of our control, but we do have the ability to stop the clock, so to speak, on our time handling the application until that application is complete. So you're going to get a better picture of processing times through the individual categories.
Our reporting is really gauged towards the audience that it was crafted for, right? So some of this is all about the critique of the process itself, right? And so at the legislative level, for representatives of the people, for the senators and assemblymen and their staffers, when they hear from their constituents that this process is taking too long, the reporting that you see here was designed to critique the state agency. Is there room for us to improve? Is there a way that we can do this faster? Frankly, there always is, right? But at the same time, there are parts of all applications
Yeah, so it sounds like we may want to adopt something similar that we did for the performance measures for enforcement, right?
Well, these, the application and licensing performance measures are underway, and that's the result here. They can't break down the stages like they do in enforcement, because enforcement is very common from one board to another. The investigation is the investigation, intake, arbitration, investigation, prosecution, working with the Attorney General's office, all of those steps are dictated by the Administrative Procedures Act, and that's very well mapped out. For applications and licensing, though, it varies greatly from one board to another, one profession to another. The examination might have something to do with it, education might have something to do with it. So it's not quite as easy to make a performance measure that can be used across all boards and bureaus the same way we did for the enforcement process, because the commonality of the enforcement process is greater across the boards and bureaus.
Are you referring to the one metric where we were able to say how many days something was under our control?
Yeah, so like for enforcement, what we've been reporting for a very long time now, the PMs,
Yes.
1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, those kind of things, was established, but it wasn't say it was easy because it was not easy by any means, but it was simpler to write a performance measure that covered all the boards and bureaus under the Department of Consumer Affairs. When you try to take that same methodology and apply it to the applications process and break down performance measures for the applications process, it's much more nuanced in the sense that we all have different application processes.
But Jason, for instance, we have categories in our performance measures where we just teased out intake only.
Right. For us, and what you see here though is the performance measure idea is DCA wide. Right. So those reportings are enforced upon us. We could tailor something that's more PTC, PTC specific, but what you're getting here is within the confines of the reporting for the whole department.
I gotcha. Okay.
So we could zoom in a little bit, drill down, if you will, into the data, but it would be on like our own individual analysis.
I just want to give credit where credit's due. It sounds to me like staff's doing a great job.
Any other questions?
Board members, any questions, comments?
For continuing competency, the PTA pass rate is 30% lower than the PT pass rate. I wonder if there's an opportunity for outreach regarding continuing competency to our PTA programs.
For the continuing competency side, at first glance, yeah, right, there is, but PTA programs get the same outreach that PT programs get currently. This continuing competency is about existing licensees, right? So, but is there a way, is there a, within the profession, is there something that is a more direct line of communication to PTAs than it is for PTs? I think part of it is just being aware of their renewal requirements, and is there even as much PTA education opportunities as there are for PTs? PTs tend to, in their specialties, take education that suits them, and there might be a higher number of classes available than maybe for PTA. That number's there's always been a little bit of a disparity in the audits between PT and PTA. I mean, it's a little wider now. The other part of it that I might attribute to it is COVID, right? And the use of practitioners during that period of time. How many actually stepped away in the middle of the pandemic, and now how many are returning? And when they are, was continuing competency at the forefront of their mind? But that's part of the whole purpose of audit, is to make sure that if they aren't, we get them, caught up to speed and brought back into that, and then try to use this information to provide that information to the rest of the population as a deterrent. We want you to get your continuing education too.
Yeah. It looks like that's a pretty low number, and for whatever reason, it could be many, but.
It's a smaller sample rate. So that's the other thing that I wouldn't, it's anomalous in the sense that out of a number of audits, you will stumble across some that aren't and are not. So that's one of the pass rates where we can look at substantial compliance and possibly consider increasing the
do we survey them as well regarding why?
No, not certain, not a formal survey in the sense, but through conversation and the audit process itself, that explanation sometimes bears out.
That's all.
Not a bad idea, though.
Yeah. It's a little alarming to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Can
wouldn't.
I got help.
Good afternoon, Sarah Conley, Assistant Executive Officer. If you don't mind, I wanted to add to that too. So as Jason was saying, the sample rate was a little bit lower, and that's partially attributed to the resource limitation we have right now in continuing competency. So we are down one position. And so that shows the need for that position is that we had to reduce the sample rate, which, so if there's even a slight change in the number of failures. So if you look at the actual number of fails, it's only a couple, but the percentage is greater. It's only a couple more than the last quarter or last year, but the percentage is greater because the sample size is so much smaller. But when we fill that vacancy, hopefully we'll have an increased sample size, which will be a better reflection of the pass rate for continuing competency for PTAs, but for both license types.
So we'll watch it.
Mm-hmm.
When you kind of give the statistical weight that's appropriate, so out of 35 bill, or out of 35 bill,
Mm-hmm.
that's a blip for a quarter. But it's something that we definitely look at when we go to quarter two, names, deciding what the sample rate should be.
It's actually out of 11, 7 failed.
Oh, it's a few years,
Yeah.
or for the last quarter.
So how many typically, if we were fully staffed, how many would we audit?
Well, I want to make one note that the total is 18. So,
I see.
so the 8 is out of 18, 7 failed.
Out of 18, 7, yeah.
Yeah. So the last quarter was 30, so I'd say around that for PTAs. And so it is still a low number for PTAs, but it's the same percentage for PTs and PTAs typically, but we had to reduce it because of the vacancy.
But it will compound over time, right? So the PTA population is growing faster than the PT population is.
Thank you. We'll just watch it.
Any further questions, comments? Board members? Public questions, comments? Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you,
Thank you, Sarah. So we will move on to agenda number 28, our Consumer Protection Services update. I agree with Alicia. I appreciate the staff introductions. Super helpful.
Let's go first. Hi, my name is Christy Livermento. I'm an enforcement analyst with the board. I've been here since December of 2009, and right now I investigate complaints received from consumers and patients from California. We work the entire case from just after intake through the discipline process. I work closely with DFI investigators in conducting some of our investigations. I conduct desk investigations, gathering information as well, and sharing that information with DFI if necessary. I also work closely with the Deputy Attorney Generals from the AG's office in processing all discipline, filing accusations, and processing discipline orders.
Good morning, board. My name is David Laxton. I'm also an enforcement analyst with the Consumer Protection Services Unit. I also conduct desk investigations on complaints received from consumers, disclosures from licensees, and reports from organizations such as the Department of Justice and FSBPT. I work all case types, And like Christy, I gather information. I get responses from our subjects of the complaints, and I make recommendations for case dispositions and follow through with those dispositions after discussion with management, which may include closing of cases or following through with administrative citations or discipline. This last year, I was also assisting with opening and initiating complaints and answering questions when they come into the Consumer Protection Services inbox. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Francisco. I have been here for about 3 weeks. So I'm still learning. So far, doing learning intake, working closely with David and Christy on how the flow of the case goes from the intake to the type of complaint that it is. So it's interesting. So.
Hello, I'm Angel Otley. I also am an enforcement analyst with the Consumer Protection Services Department. I've been with the board for about 7 years and currently with the enforcement for about 5 months now. I also do the intake processing for consumer complaints that have been against physical therapists, assistants licensed within the board. A wide range of different type of complaints, deal with the intake to the end process, also do case review recommendations, dealing with patient records, requesting expert review, to review patient records. I work with the DOI as well for sending out investigations and what we may need for the cases.
I really want to give kudos to the work that you four are doing, not downplaying what everybody else does, but knowing that you're coming to work to hear complaints every day. It's got to take a toll. So hats off to you guys for doing such a good job at it. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I also want to give kudos. When I first joined the board, we received all the cases via email, voted via email. Everything was its own attachment. Now I get, in the portal, everything's in one concise PDF and there's definitions and it's just really clear and easy to understand. So thank you for taking the time to organize all the documents.
And thank you for your patience and the reminders. As a new board member, I appreciate when there's a big flag that says vote now. This is the due date. Because I know you guys are doing your job, so we recognize we don't want to hold it up. So appreciate your patience nevertheless.
I want to echo that and say that board staff is never bothering us when you remind us, and don't hesitate to remind us because we need it, right? I mean, sometimes that reminder's like, I better do that right now. So definitely thank you for that and continue to do that.
Lord, yes. I get a friendly nudge, a friendly reminder.
Hey.
Yes.
Something that occurred to me while we were doing the intros, though, and I just want to try this really quick. So, with the folks that are sitting up here right now, Angel spoke to being in CPS, but how long have you been on the board?
7 years.
What unit did you start with?
Office technician, intake for the applications. Then I migrated to applications, doing the PT, PTA, new grad, CAPTE accredited new grad. I also assisted and did PTA foreign and then migrated to the CC unit. And now, I'm sorry? Yep, CCO, continue.
All that knowledge going into enforcement.
I started out at the mail desk processing all incoming mail, processing our cashier check log with incoming checks, processing address changes for licensees, processing renewals, processing fingerprints, all the maintenance for just the same. And then
I've been with the board for 17 years.
Ooh.
I started as a student assistant, opening mail, cashiering, a little time in licensing, and and I started with CPS in 2013.
Welcome. Thank you.
He's happy he's here.
Yes.
And that same kind of taking knowledge from each unit and kind of moving around from personal experience allows me, each experience that you had that you took from one unit to the next. In hindsight, when I look back, because I started in applications and licensing, doing license maintenance, right? Justin and I had that in common. And then continuing competency became the next kind of role of responsibility. And then over to the enforcement side and looking, every time I did that, it provided me additional perspective and clarity on the job that I used to do, right? In the context of like where I am in line and where it moves from the applications over to the CC and then from the CC into the enforcement and so on. So the internal structure, I mean, there's a plethora of experience that kind of transfers from one unit, and we try to retain as much of that knowledge as we possibly can.
You guys are the definition of what a career ladder looks like. Like you can really climb the ladder and grow in this department. It really
Gain
does
that
exist.
knowledge.
I'm actually not the youngest anymore with the board. For the last since I joined in June, I'm very impressed with the dynamic knowledge base that the staff have in this board, and also the board's knowledge of the profession. So it gave me really a pause in thinking that, what is something that exemplary that this board can present to the other boards as an example to be able to efficiently and effectively handle the amount of work with limited resources and people, wearing so many hats, which I think benefits the organization in a way that, the cross training happened naturally, right? And thank you so much for, the contributions that you guys have, because without you guys, we all board would not be a very good board.
To Mr. Q's point, I can't actually bring Francisco back in because Francisco has state service outside of the Department of Consumer Affairs, which is just one example of bringing that kind of experience and knowledge base in. And there are a few analysts that aren't here today that they started their careers, I believe Angel, right?
What?
Before PTBC.
Mhm.
Where were you at?
I was at it's a business resource unit. We're at HQ. Yeah, I did the mail, scanned all the documents from other boards.
So there is that kind of interchanging of even not just within units inside, but coming from outside of other boards and even other state agencies that we get the advantage of too.
Any more comments, board members? You'd like to?
And I just also want to add that Angel and Francisco have been a breath of fresh air to the unit. The entire unit is great, but Francisco and Angel have been really patient with me in trying to explain what we need to gather, what we need to do to get that information. And
thank you.
Yes, they take, I don't know if it's criticism, but my suggestions.
I
very
appreciate
well.
it. I don't take anything negative. I don't take anything negative.
Suggestions very well.
Yep. That's how we learn.
Thank you.
Guys. Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I will add that there are two other CPS unit staff that were not able to attend this meeting today, so I'll just give a brief shout out to them. Beatrice Reynoso is an analyst who's been with the board longer than I have. She's been in the CPS unit since I got there, and I'm sorry that I don't know exactly how long she's been there, but she's a longtime service member. I've been here for almost 14 years, and she's been here longer than that. So she's got a lot, the breadth of experience in this unit. And then the other analyst who couldn't be here today is Marnie Kincaid. She has been with the board since, I believe, 2016 or 2017. She came from another unit. She came from the accountancy board. So some of her experience, has definitely carried over into what she does here. Marnie handles mainly conviction cases, both for applicants and licensees. It's obviously a different mindset for each one. For an applicant, we're trying to determine if they're safe to practice, whether to even grant them a license with or without restrictions. Whereas for a licensee, they're already practicing. So there's that urgency of, continuing to practice, placing restrictions, getting, those kinds of things in place. So it's a completely different process, similar, but a different mindset as far as the ultimate decision and recommendations to be made. So she handles both of those types of cases, and she's got really great experience and really great advice and recommendations when she comes to offer those. So that's the rest of our unit. And of course, Monty Martin is part of the Consumer Protection Services unit, but he's a separate item on your agenda, so he will come up separately from that. So I will just briefly go over the Consumer Protection Services update for you. I'm sorry? Who are you? All right. My name is Carol Phelps. I'm the manager of the enforcement unit. Like I said, I've been with the board for just about 14 years. It'll be 14 years come February. I've been the manager for a little less than a year, almost. So again, February. I guess February is my magic month. So come February, it'll be a year doing this job. Prior to that, I started with the board in the Consumer Protection Services unit doing address change citations. Quickly moved on from those to handling consumer complaints, conviction complaints. Did the applicants kind of have gone through all of the different kinds of complaints at one time or another, investigating those. And now as the manager, I just kind of assist the unit with being efficient, help the analysts with reports that need to be submitted, helping experts get paid, having contracts on file for them, just kind of ensuring everything runs smoothly so that when the analysts have to go and get a task done, everything's in place for that. And as far as reporting statistics and things, making sure all of that information is squared away and in order. So that's the bulk of my job now. So any questions on that so far?
You're holding your own.
All right. Thank you. So I'll go on to the unit update. As was previously reported and has been discussed, the CPS program filled one of our vacant analyst positions as of July 1 when Angel Otley joined our team. She came to us from the continuing competency unit, and she now conducts desk investigations of consumer complaints. I'm also very excited to report that as of November 15th, we welcome Francisco Salas to our team, and the Consumer Protection Services unit is now fully staffed. Mr. Salas is new to the PTBC and to DCA and is currently training to take over the case intake and initiation process and to investigate some of the lower complexity complaint cases. Although both of their trainings and is ongoing, the addition of Ms. Otley and Mr. Salas to our team have allowed me to alleviate the workload of the other enforcement analysts to approach a more manageable level. So everyone's really grateful for their presence in our unit, and everyone has been so great in taking time to train on the various processes. There's a lot involved in enforcement. You can say I do intake, but there's 75 steps to an intake. So there's a lot of detail involved in that, and it takes time and repetition to train and really get the knowledge base for that. So I do want to express my thanks and appreciation to all of the CPS staff for their patience and flexibility in carrying the additional workload for the past year while we've had vacancies, and in the efforts they've made in training and just overall support of everybody. Everybody in the CPS unit can go to anybody else in the CPS unit for assistance, and everybody's always willing to help. And it's really a great kind of team environment that we have, and I really appreciate that from staff. Working together with other board staff, especially April Beauchamp and Vincent Azar, we have now successfully updated the board's website. We now provide consumer protection related resources and information on our consumers page and on our new enforcement page. While the consumers page still contains information most consumers would be seeking, like complaint filing information, the link to conduct a license search, and answers to consumers' frequently asked questions, the enforcement page now provides easy access to the board's performance measures, disciplinary guidelines, information on the probation monitoring program, the expert consultant program, and other information specific to the board's enforcement actions. Consumer information about filing a complaint is available on both pages. Now for the CPS statistics report that's on page 83 of the meeting material packet, I'll briefly point out a few statistics of interest. Performance measure 1, complaint intake, shows that the number of complaints received this quarter has increased by 34% over last fiscal year, with a total of 160 complaints received. While that does seem like a big increase, this number is comparable to pre-pandemic statistics. So it had gone down kind of during the pandemic, and we're seeing it get back to where it was before. Performance measure 3 shows the average age in days for all cases that were closed without referral to the Attorney General's office for formal discipline. The average case age went down 27% in comparison to last fiscal year. These numbers are known to fluctuate greatly as they reflect the average of all cases and encompass entire investigative process that involves the timelines, workloads, and response times of not only CPS staff, but of all involved parties, including Division of Investigation, licensees, complainants. So it's a wide range. Our target for this performance measure is 180 days. So with a current average cycle time of 122 days, we met this target this quarter. I also wanted to point out that 81% of the investigations completed last quarter, or 103 cases, aged 180 days or less. So it's a small portion of the cases that are going over that will sometimes make our average, higher than what we're hoping for. For performance measure 4, it captures the average case age in days for cases that were referred to the Attorney General's office for formal discipline. The average age of 552 days is lower compared to last fiscal year, and is just over the target of 540 days. And again, it's an average, so there's great fluctuation in that. Although pandemic-related issues are no longer causing lengthy delays in our current investigations, the statistics reported here may still reflect higher processing times as we finalize the small number of cases that are still open that experienced pandemic-related delays early in their investigation process. Just to give you an idea of what the analysts have on their desk at this time, there are currently 403 open complaint investigation cases currently being investigated by our 6 analysts. 7 of those cases were opened in 2019, 6 were opened in 2020, 24 cases were opened in 2021, 84 were opened in 2022, and 279 of them were opened in 2023. So that's of the currently open cases, that's kind of the aging that we're looking at.
Thank you. That's interesting.
The disciplinary summary of all formal discipline issued in quarter 1 is included as attachment B to this report. In this reported quarter, there were 3 licensees who entered a stipulated agreement to surrender their licenses. 2 licenses were revoked, and 1 licensee was placed on probation. This concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question on page 83 under citations. I'm not sure why I always assume citations were kind of open and shut, but apparently it does take some time to do the investigation and, determine it's appropriate for a citation. But, I remember you compared it kind of like to a parking ticket. So I thought maybe it'd be a little bit more streamlined, but apparently it does take some time. Just want to make an observation.
Determination of whether the complaint received rises to the level of discipline, right? And so if you think about it in kind of a hierarchy, we might investigate it for a very long time to realize that there's not really a lot to see here, but there are some kind of minor violations that need to be considered as a result of the citation, and that can skew that statistic. But it's also almost a gradient, right, of the level of what recourse the board should take in that situation. The citation being the lowest, it doesn't really qualify as discipline, it's still being handled in the same investigatory process.
Is it sometimes due to like evidentiary issues? You can only give a citation?
It can be a contribution. I guess like really maybe a cleaner example of that would be receiving a subsequent arrest notification for a licensee involving a DUI, right? And so like the first time DUI, with very result in citation. Single capture in time, temporary lapse in judgment, that kind of thing. Same situation. Could be on the way to work in scrubs, with a kid in the back of the car resulting in an accident and a BAC of 0.25. And that's discipline, right? But the investigation process is very disciplined.
Any other comments, questions from the board? Any public comment? Hearing none. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 29, our probation monitoring services update.
Morning, board members. You guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Monty Martin. I am the probation monitor and substance abuse rehab program manager for the board. Been with the board since 1998. Started out doing, like everyone else, mail, sending out applications, address changes, that kind of thing. Transitioned into applications and licensing. 2007 became the probation monitor, and in 2009 became the substance abuse rehab program manager. I'll be reporting on the first quarter of fiscal year 2023-2024 for the probation monitoring program. You also have some stats that go along with my report. At the end of the first quarter of fiscal year 2023-2024, there were a total of 77 licensees on probation for various causes. That is up from 75 licensees compared to the same quarter last year. Besides the 59 licensees on probation and actively working in the state of California, there were an additional 9 out of state. We say those probationers are tolling. That means they're not receiving credit towards the completion of their probation because they are not working in the state. And that is a requirement to complete the probation. There are an additional 9 probationers in state who are also tolling. That can be due to unemployment or just underemployment, where they're working but maybe not able to complete the required number of hours to get credit for the probation. That's usually set at 192 hours in the quarter, and some people are unable to reach that. So although they are working, they're not technically getting credit for the probation. There was an additional licensee placed on probation in the quarter, and 1 licensee completed probation in the quarter. Of the 59 licensees that are not tolling and are working in the state, there's approximately 9 enrolled in our substance abuse rehab program right now. That equals about 15% of our licensees that are working in the state. There was 1 licensee that enrolled in the quarter and 0 licensees completed the program in that quarter. There were 0 instances of major non-compliance with probation in the quarter. However, there were 4 instances of minor violations, which were handled by sending warning letters to the offending licensees. Some of those violations include missing scheduled interviews, not turning in paperwork, and there was a low-level positive test for alcohol, which that person disputed and said it was due to a diet change. So just kept it at a minor violation because we couldn't determine whether or not that person had actually injected or ingested alcohol because of the low level it was at.
So there's that reason, and then there was something about paperwork, you said?
Yes, so there was one that did not submit their quarterly paperwork and as well did not show up for the scheduled interview.
And other reasons in general?
Mostly it would be for not showing up for scheduled interviews or turning in their paperwork late or not at all. Sometimes there's, they might be delinquent on payments where I have to send them reminders, hey, this is due, it's time to pay it, that
Those
type of thing.
are instances of minor violations.
Minor violations.
Thank you very much. That's helpful.
Let's see. And then in comparison to last year, for the same quarter, we had one person enter probation compared to 4 for the same quarter last year. And everything else is pretty similar. And the probation or the substance abuse rehab stats are pretty similar as well. There's not a lot of changes there from year to year. Last year, we did have somebody who was terminated from the program for public risk in the first quarter, and we didn't have anybody in that situation this quarter. So, any questions or?
What does it look like when somebody's probation ends? Do you like meet with them finally and go over things, or?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. It depends on when that person's probation ends. So if their probation ends and it's kind of on the same lines as their probation schedule, so normally I would meet with an individual on a quarterly basis. If their probation is going to end and it's kind of on that same schedule, I may talk to them before they go and kind of just say, hey, this is going to be our last one. This is kind of what you can expect. But if they finish in the middle of a quarter and I'm not due to talk to them for like another month, I may just say, send me your paperwork, and as long as you've worked your hours or whatever, that's kind of going to be it. I'll ask them if they have any final questions. But mostly what I do is just update Breeze, our system, to reflect that they've completed probation. If it's not an initial probationary license, if it's somebody that's stipped, a new order is created and that's posted on Breeze so people can see that they've completed probation. And then they also receive a copy of that order in the mail from me so they have it for their own records.
Moni, can I ask you a question? You've been doing this for how many years total?
Probation monitor or working here?
Probation monitor.
2007 is when I started.
And so prior to COVID, you were able to see everyone in person, no problems. I'm wondering now,
Yeah, so that's
can you tell
changed.
me a little bit about the challenges, just so that, so the public is aware of, what you do and how it might change your ability or your ability to complete things when you have to do the video.
Yeah, so my job is, has kind of changed a lot since the pandemic. So before then, I was traveling out and seeing everybody when I could. For the people in the LA area, that was a little bit more difficult just because probably half the people I see are in that area. So for them, it was like I would see them twice a year. For the other people where I could get to them more readily, I would see them every quarter. Obviously, I couldn't get to see everybody just because I'm one person, the state's so big. So after the pandemic, though, we still wanted to be able to meet with people, see them face to face. I don't know if you guys heard, there was a lot of substance abuse and drinking happening during that time. So it was nice to be able to see them, make sure they're still okay. So, but now I'm doing most of my interviews that way. It's just, I think, a better use of my time. I was telling somebody the other day, there was days where I would be driving 6 hours, see 2 people. And those days feel kind of wasted to me because I know there's a lot more I could be doing. So on Teams now, I'm able to see even, the LA people, I see them all in approximately a week, doing like 8 interviews a day. So I'm able to see everybody now, even the out-of-state people. This month, we're going to start doing interviews with them again and requiring them to send in quarterly reports as well every quarter. So because of that, some of those people are delinquent on their license. They don't plan to come back to California and practice, so their licenses aren't current. And just in reaching out to some of those people, I'm getting responses, well, like, I'm not going to come back. Do I have to do this? For those people that don't want to do it, they can request to surrender their license. That's a possibility for them if they don't want to continue and don't plan to come back to the state. So,
Thank you. That's helpful.
any other questions?
What are some general reasons for in-state tolling?
In-state tolling is mostly unemployment. That can range from a variety of things. I have people who are in remote areas that say, I just can't meet the requirements. I'm in a remote area. There's not a lot of opportunities. So once people hear I'm on probation, I kind of have to go outside my area to find a job, and that can be difficult. Or like I said, people who are working, it's just maybe for health reasons, or they can't always have a supervisor present. They can't work like a full-time schedule. If you break down 192 hours over a 3-month period, it comes out to about 16 hours a week. So it's less than half time, but some people are still unable to fulfill that requirement. So I feel bad for those people because they are doing all the requirements of probation, but they're not getting credit for it. So.
Any further questions or comments from Monty? Any public questions or comments? Hearing none. Thank you, Monty.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monty.
We are moving on to. So now we're moving on to agenda item 30. Our board member elections. I'm going to ask for some guidance with this.
So, essentially, at this portion of the meeting, we're going to revisit the idea of who the future board president or board vice president is going to be first and foremost. After that, we're going to look at representation for FSBPT's delegate assembly, and looking for a delegate, an alternate delegate, and then the structure of how the delegation works in the event that we have a situation. So, essentially, we need nominations for president first.
Do we consider a board member who's not here today?
Yes, and I will be providing that representation.
I'd like to nominate for president Tanya McMillan.
I second.
Any other nominations? Hearing none.
Let me make a statement. The 1 year is really not enough time to really learn this position. And not only as president, now that I've walked in these shoes and I'm realizing we don't need enough, to really get a grasp of it. But I'm so grateful to Alicia and Michael. Like, I'm sitting in between two giants. You know what I mean? No, seriously. Who understand this position. And so at some point, I don't know how it can be done or if it's even possible, but the term for these positions really need to be more than 1 year.
That's an interesting idea.
So I just throw that out there.
I concur.
Yeah, well, so that's a separate item, so I'll speak to it real quick, and I don't want Michael to jump on it because it's not part of the nominating process part of it, but I would ask for comment from 2 of the board members, right? I would say that there was a time a few years ago that we may have heard kind of a similar sentiment from Dr. Arnett, and having somebody that was there to provide her counsel, her presence. Is that fair to say? And then I would also say, from Ms. Ellerby, that she has probably echoed that same sentiment, that there was somebody there to provide her that same kind of guidance when she was president of the board as well. The idea of the duration of time is entirely up to you as a panel, right? While we're doing this annually, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be that way.
Michael Kenotes, legal counsel. So the Boards Practice Act does require the elections to occur annually. So that's 2604.
Wow, thank you.
Annually, the board shall elect one of its members as president, one of its members as vice president. But we should probably at this point contain discussion on this issue because it's not agendized as a discussion matter. It's just elections. That's fair.
Thanks, Mike. You got a motion and a second?
Yeah, that's right.
So a motion and a second, not hearing a second nomination. We can vote for that motion. Oh, absolutely.
Public comment?
Tanya McMillian. Dale Armstrong. Dale Armstrong is absent. Karen Brandon.
Aye.
Katarina Elby.
Aye.
Samuel Pugh.
Aye.
Alicia Benet. Aye. 5-0. Motion carried.
They're glutton for punishment.
So next on the list is hearing nominations for vice president.
I nominate Dale Armstrong.
I second.
Dr. Armstrong would accept the nomination. Hearing any other nominations? Public comment?
Tanya McMillian. Aye. Dale Armstrong. Dale Armstrong is absent. Karen Brandon.
Aye.
Katarina Elby.
Aye.
Samuel Pugh.
Aye.
Alicia Benet. Aye. 5-0. Motion carried.
Moving on to, yes. For SSBPT delegate, any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Q.
I second. Any discussion, comments? Sam Q?
Will you accept the
Will you
nomination?
accept it? Okay. Any public comment? Hearing none. Let's vote.
Tanya McMillian.
Aye.
Dale Armstrong. Dale Armstrong is absent. Karen Brandon.
Aye.
Katarina Elby.
Aye.
Samuel Pugh.
Aye.
Alicia Benet. Aye. 5-0. Motion carried.
Thank you.
On to alternate delegate. The nominations for an alternate delegate.
I'd like to nominate Dr. Brandon.
Second.
I accept the nomination.
Yes. Any board comment? Public comment? Hearing none. Vote.
Tanya McMillian.
Aye.
Dale Armstrong. Dale Armstrong is absent. Karen Brandon.
Aye.
Katarina Elby.
Aye.
Samuel Pugh.
Aye.
Alicia Benet.
Aye.
5-0. Motion carried.
Congratulations.
For E, for a backup delegate, if I remember correctly, last year we said that we were going to go in alphabetical order. And we tend to kind of just alternate from one year to the next to kind of keep a mixture. And so it's really holding to that tradition, whether the board would like to continue to do it that way. That would be an issue that should the delegate or alternate delegate not be able to perform their role or duty, that we would move to the next available, and we would do it in the reverse alphabetical order this year.
So that'd be you, Alicia.
Yeah, and I enjoy my time attending FSBPT conferences and being involved with them. And I'm just thinking with Dr. Armstrong having a last name that starts with A, and maybe giving her an opportunity, should it come up, for her to be the first person to go, I would recommend that we go back to alphabetical order.
I agree.
Motion?
I move that the FSBPT backup delegate start in alphabetical order with those who have not already been appointed to delegate and alternate delegate.
Second. Further board comment for that motion? No? Public comment? So we'll vote on the motion.
Tanya McMillian.
Aye.
Dale Armstrong. Dale Armstrong is absent. Karen Brandon.
Aye.
Katarina Elby.
Aye.
Samuel Pugh.
Aye.
Leisure Bennett.
Aye.
5-0, motion carried.
So the backup delegate is, we'll start with the other way. Okay, got it.
Amazing.
Historically speaking, that is historic.
Okay, we're moving on to agenda item 31, public comment on items not on the agenda. Hearing none. Agenda item number 32, our next meeting is March 20th and 21st, 2024, and location to be determined.
Actually, I think that's different now
Because of the calendar, right?
Right, and that
Exactly.
location is now located at the university.
It is? Since
Location.
yesterday?
Since yesterday.
And the
And
dates?
the dates,
Would be instead of the-
1920.
so the March 19th and 20th, and the location is Loma Linda.
Thank you all for accommodating me as the legal division extends its thanks.
You're worth it. And this agenda item is for agenda items for future meeting, right?
Correct.
And so I held myself back last time, but I think I'll speak up this time. And I'd like for the president to just consider for a future board meeting, maybe revisiting the topic of dry needling. And so I know that we've had a presentation in the past. It's been some time. Sounds like it's on the radar in some places, but maybe looking into that again.
I have a suggestion as well, since we're going to be at a university with a younger crowd, maybe discussing telehealth or having some information session about that might be helpful for the students.
Yeah, I would add for licensees as well. I mean, licensees are always really curious about the do's and don'ts and ins and outs of telehealth, so, yeah.
Okay, any other comments for agenda items on future meetings on the board? No? Public comment? None? We will break for lunch. We're done.
Done. I think we don't have a closed session, so you may adjourn us, Madam President.
The meeting is adjourned at 12:18.